couldn't be bad or mean. I love always sing and dance.
Hello, I'm going insane because I've rewritten the script about 5 times and I've re-recorded this entire video about 2 times. Like, went through the full editing process and everything, but it just hasn't felt right. But this is the one. This is it. I can feel it. I am very fascinated with like TV and movie franchises with like messy histories, specifically the ones based around cartoon characters. And so today I'm going to be telling you the story about one of these franchises and my theory as to how it crashed and burned. Whether or not you've watched any of the cartoons or movies, there's a good chance that you're at least familiar with the concept of Casper. He's a ghost who just wants to make friends, but everyone is just mortified upon seeing this floating light bulb. It's ironic, it's cute, what's not to love? What initially sparked the idea behind this video is a few years back when I was looking for a Casper shirt or something to get festive for Halloween. No matter where I looked, I couldn't find anything. I scavenged every t-shirt section of the nearest Walmart, TJ Maxx, every thrift store within a reasonable driving distance, and I found nothing. Nothing. Zero Casper merch. And I find that a little unsettling. I feel like Casper should be like right up there next to Jack Skellington for one of the most marketable Halloween characters ever. Even when you check online, the only available merch is just, despite lacking merchandise or any real physical proof of its existence, Casper has definitely left some sort of an impact on pop culture, or at least an echo, or maybe a small stain. But even then, Casper is really only acknowledged in modern media in the form of parodies and brief references. Casper was pretty successful during the early 2000s, but after that era, he just seemed to slowly fade out of existence. Casper is definitely what I would consider to be one of the most recognizable cartoon characters of all time. But over the years, he turned into one of the most forgettable. In this video, I'm going to be guiding you through the history of the franchise in order to answer the question, where did it all go wrong? Or in other words, what killed Casper the Friendly Ghost? I think that was the intro. I think we finally got it. I've been working on this for 3 years. I was introduced to Casper through the original cartoons from the 1940s, and saying that modern iterations of the cartoons, like Casper's Scare School, are a little different from the originals, it's an understatement.
No use. I'm just a scary old ghost.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
My name is Bonnie. My name is Johnny.
Why do you say it like that? My name is Johnny. My name is Johnny.
My name is Johnny.
My name is Casper.
Do you want to play with us?
In the beginning, Casper was a children's storybook created by Seymour Reed and Joe Oriolo. I apologize in advance for that pronunciation. I don't think that the original storybook concept was successful in publishing. As far as I know, there were never any copies that came into existence, and after attempting to publish that original story, the rights were later sold to Paramount. The first cartoon that Casper appeared in was titled The Friendly Ghost, which sets up the most cut-and-clear premise that you could possibly make for Casper.
Every night, the stroke of 12, his brothers and sisters scampered out joyously to frighten the folk of the neighborhood.
Some aspects of this first cartoon and the other earlier cartoons solidified certain tropes which have formed Casper's brand as well as his story's formula. Such tropes include him being peer pressured by the other ghosts, getting in trouble in school or with other ghosts for not wanting to be scary, and civilians having over-the-top reactions upon seeing Casper. My all-time favorite out of the classics is There's Good Booze Tonight. I believe that this cartoon in particular is the epitome of Casper. Not just the average Casper story, but one that is genuinely well executed because it incorporates everything that I believe to be essential to capture the heart of his character. The cartoon begins, as most of the stories do, with Casper leaving a community of other ghosts and starting a story to find friends and start a new life. Or, metaphorically speaking, but he only scares people away, one after another, until he's given up all hope. But then a fox stumbles upon Casper and tries to cheer him up.
Aren't you scared of me? Oh, so you want to play with me? All right.
They end up bonding and playing some games together, and it's adorable.
You're my best friend, so I'll give you an extra special name. Ferdy. That's it. Ferdy Fox.
And they live happily ever after. Or at least that's the usual status quo for Casper. This time, things take a turn when a hunter shows up. And since Casper is distracted during their game of hide and seek, he doesn't realize what's happening until it's too late.
They're after Ferdy. Stop. Stop. Don't hurt my Ferdy. He's my friend. A ghost. Ferdy. Ferdy. They're gone. Where are you? Ferdy, are you all right?
Yeah, the fox dies. Out of all the classics, this one is by far the most grim, but with it still being meant for kids, Ferdy, of course, comes back as a ghost, and they live happily ever after. Good Boost Tonight checks all of the boxes for what a good Casper story needs. Telling the story through a wholesome, childlike lens, finding companionship in unlikely places, and the experience of isolation or disconnection, whether that be a disconnect with other people or yourself. And this last one isn't really a necessity, but the premise and overall aesthetic of the cartoon really complements and adds on to the tone of the story. Although that wasn't exactly intentional at the time of its production, it still gives the story an extra layer of, dread in a charming way. In most of the Casper cartoons, the story ends when Casper finds new friends or is finally accepted as he is. But when this happens, it's often the result of the other characters somehow benefiting from Casper when he steps in to serve the role as the underdog or hero.
You big bully! Leave my little friend alone!
Ah! A ghost! Don't you come near us! Go on home! You go on where you belong!
Tell your mother I've come for payment of the mortgage. A ghost! The house is haunted! Keep the mortgage!
So the affection he finally receives isn't out of love, it's out of necessity and convenience for the other characters. At the start of every story, Casper is living in an environment that leaves him excluded and miserable. What seems to be the only characteristic shared by all of the other ghosts is the one thing that Casper rejects.
Do you have a job for a friendly ghost?
A friendly ghost? A friendly ghost?
But when he searches for a safe space and people who he can connect with, he ends up having to make an exchange for it. It's emphasized over and over again that Casper doesn't want to scare people. He hates it, and the fact that he has no control over it results in constant self-loathing.
I might as well be dead.
So the fact that utilizing the one thing he hates most about himself is the only way for Casper to find a healthy community, it's just a terrible message. Am I reading too deeply into this? No, actually, I don't think so. He's willing to do whatever it takes to earn acceptance in these idealized communities, but it ends up putting him in a position that might actually be worse than where he started. For example, in Blue Moon, Casper goes to the moon because literally no one on Earth wants to be his friend. He meets some moon people and they immediately declare that he's a monster before proceeding to imprison him.
Even the moon people are afraid of me.
That is, until the Moon Kingdom is attacked by tree monsters. Casper then comes to the rescue and defeats them by going underground and tying their limbs together.
Casper, the friendly ghost, he wouldn't be there.
Hey! You got him on the run!
And only then is Casper welcomed to their kingdom as a hero. But that kind of happy ending is exactly what Good Boost Tonight manages to avoid. The friend that comes along is the first character to willingly approach Casper rather than the other way around, and doesn't get scared. Ferdy has the pure intention of wanting to make Casper happy, for nothing in return. I also think it's fitting that Ferdy is a fox. Traditionally, foxes are commonly used in cartoons and children's stories as villains with negative traits metaphorically associated with the animal, similar to a big bad wolf type character. Both Casper and Ferdy exist as things that we've been taught to be scared or weary of. It just works so well as a picture of a wholesome and healthy friendship. All in all, There's Good Boost Tonight is a near perfect example of the potential that Casper has, both as a great character as well as a heartwarming and emotionally complex narrative. It wasn't long after Good Boost Tonight night that Casper started undergoing his first major changes. The main change was the removal of any imagery associated with graves and cemeteries, or at least Casper was no longer being shown hanging out by his own grave. The goal was to remove the implication that Casper was, well, dead. It was decided to instead portray him as a vague Halloween monster, in favor of making the cartoons more lighthearted. It's similar to the portrayal of ghosts in Ghostbusters or the last season of Danny Phantom. You know, when they went from fighting ghosts with actual backstories and motivations to just monsters. I personally think that this is dumb, since that goes against the literal definition of what a ghost is, but I understand in this case it was getting a little too heavy for the kids. From that point on, Casper was placed in environments and scenarios that were much more upbeat and colorful, while still retaining some of the more iconic tropes, like the over-the-top reactions of people getting scared by Casper, because you can't just not include that one in a Casper cartoon. It's the law. Once the franchise seemed to find its footing, Casper cartoons were produced consistently, with every decade introducing a new design and/or new characters in a revamped show. But as times changed, along with trends in animation, Casper's popularity began to wind down. But everything would change forever in 1995, when Casper would get his biggest makeover yet in a brand new CGI form in his first live-action movie.
Being a ghost is really dumb.
Sorry, nephew, but it's time to go on the big spree!
Haunting season opens May 26th.
Fun fact, Casper was the first ever animated main character to be made in CGI for a live-action movie, which is a very specific milestone, but cool nonetheless. Assuming that everyone watching this video is familiar with the movie but hasn't seen it in a while, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm just gonna cover the whole plot in this section of the video, so get comfortable. The catalyst for the plot is this lady Kerrigan, who also serves as the antagonist. She also has this assistant Dibs, who is British. Kerrigan finds out that she has inherited a mansion, Whipstaff Manor, after the death of her dad or grandfather or whatever. Kerrigan decides that she wants nothing to do with the dilapidated mansion, so naturally, she immediately tosses the deed into the fireplace. But Dibs notices, just in time, that the fire just happened to reveal a hidden message on the deed, national treasure style.
Buccaneers and buried gold, Whipstaff doth a treasure hold.
Treasure? I knew that place was worth something.
They go to investigate but discover that the place is haunted by a couple of ghosts who are revealed to be Casper and his three uncles, Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso. Their names are pretty self-explanatory. These three are most commonly referred to within the franchise as the Ghostly Trio. Next up, we get a montage of Kerrigan hiring a bunch of people to try and exterminate Casper and his uncles, but nothing works. And later that night, Casper is watching TV. I don't know how he has cable, but whatevs. And he stumbles upon Dr. Harvey. Another fun fact, the last name Harvey is a reference to the original publisher of the Casper comics. Casper sees that this Dr. Harvey is a therapist for the dead, and also Casper thinks his daughter is cute.
The living impaired are known for haunting us. My question is, what's haunting them?
So Casper finds a way to get Kerrigan in contact with Dr. Harvey so he can get a chance to meet his daughter, Cat Harvey. Is Casper aware that this lady is willing to do anything to get rid of him and his uncles? Yes. Did he just make that easier for her? Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure what Casper's logic was here other than pretty girl, but I guess that doesn't matter because his plan actually works.
I don't care what they said. You are not demented.
They were talking about you. Try explaining afterlife therapy to what's junior high kids.
Some people go through life never questioning the norm. You and I, we're doing something extraordinary with our lives.
We aren't doing anything. You're the one who's been packing up my stuff and moving me around the country.
You sound like your mother.
You're not gonna find her. Mom's not a ghost, Dad.
We've already been informed that James is a ghost therapist, but now we're finding out that the backstory behind that is he dropped his old job as a regular therapist shortly after the death of his wife.
If I don't find what I'm looking for, then no more moving, no more ghost mining.
You promise?
Promise.
Deal.
Once they arrive and meet Casper and his uncles, it becomes pretty clear that James has never actually seen a ghost. I guess he's just been confident enough to convince himself that he's been talking to ghosts this whole time, or maybe he's just confused as to why these ghosts in particular are CGI. So needless to say, he's a tad in over his head to be working with these three. James spends his portion of the movie dealing with the Ghostly Trio, while Casper spends most of his screen time getting friend-zoned. He doesn't leave Cat alone most of the time. He even follows her to school on her first day without her knowing. When Cat introduces herself to the class and explains that she's temporarily living in Whipstaff Manor, everyone in the room automatically agrees that she should be the one to host the Halloween dance.
Mr. Curtis, check this. We're dead for the Halloween dance, right? This girl has a seriously creepy house with room to spare.
I don't know how this dance is supposed to work. Like, is this Halloween party for just this one class? Doesn't this teacher have multiple groups of students, since that's how class periods work? Is this teacher organizing individual parties for all of his classes? Normal teachers just get a tray of those cookies from Walmart, and if they're lucky, maybe they'll get to play Halloween-themed hangman on the whiteboard for the last 10 minutes of class. I would assume that this is supposed to be a regular school dance, but it looks like this guy is the only teacher who's organizing the whole thing. I'd feel bad for him, but this is the same man who stands to the side and watches his class peer pressure the new kid into hosting a party for a bunch of people she just met. Kat's only been here for 2 days at most. It's not even her house. Kat seems to be cool with it and everything seems fine and dandy, but Mean Girl makes a scene because she had already volunteered to host the party at her place.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Whoever wants to party at my house, raise your hand.
Whip staff?
And even though Kat didn't know there was a party in the first place, Mean Girl decides that she needs to get revenge. It's a very one-sided rivalry that seems like set up for Mean Girl to be a minor antagonist, but all what she does is ask some guy to ask Kat out to the dance so that way he can end up ditching her.
So listen, if you're not hooked up with anybody else, you wanna, I don't know, hang out with me at the party?
I'd love to.
Alright, cool. Alright, see ya.
Did you ask her?
Yeah.
And she actually believed you?
I assumed she just wanted to get Kat stood up so she would be sad, but then Mean Girl decides to put on a costume to also scare her at a Halloween party where dozens of people are already gonna be dressed up in scary costumes. What was she expecting? Like, what reaction was she wanting to get out of this? Oh, no, it's a tall person, and Kat never finds out about any of that. And there isn't anything to make her assume that her date ditched her on purpose or asked her out as a joke. So this prank just leaves her kind of confused. So if you think about it, this plotline is like a metaphor for me in this movie. After Casper finds out about the dance, he insists on being Kat's date, but that isn't going to be too easy since he doesn't even have legs to dance with.
Casper, I have a date. What's this Vic guy got that I don't, huh?
A pulse?
This conversation somehow leads to Casper and Kat having a heart-to-heart and unpacking their troubles.
What were you like when you were alive? I don't remember. You don't remember anything from your life? No. Is that bad? No. It's just kind of sad.
And she asks Casper about death since he has experience.
If my mom's a ghost, did she forget about me? No. She'd never forget you. Kat? Mm-hmm. If I were alive, would you go to the Halloween dance with me? Mm-hmm. Kat? Can I keep you? Casper, close the window. It's cold.
A day or two after that conversation, Kat does some exploring around the mansion and winds up finding some of Casper's old stuff in the attic, which causes this very noticeable shift in tone that makes the entire movie start to feel, for lack of better term, depressing. This is the first time ever in this franchise that we see a story directly address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that Casper is the ghost of a dead kid. Sure, we've technically seen his gravestone before, but now we're seeing toys, pictures, and stuff that belonged to a real person and emphasizes how young Casper was when he died. Even to this day, no other piece of Casper media has gotten this detailed and personal with the character.
It was my mom's. Can I? Go ahead.
And seeing all of his stuff laid out triggers some memories for Casper, which takes us into this scene.
Actually, turns out that I can't play this clip completely because Universal didn't really like that the first time I tried uploading this video. Love ya, Universal. But the gist of this scene is that Casper is going into detail about what it was like when he died, and basically he stayed out sledding for too long, and I'm pretty sure in canon he got pneumonia and died from pneumonia. So yeah, and specifically the sad part is when he says it got dark, it got cold, and I got sick. And my dad got sad. So yeah, this scene is like surprisingly sad and dramatic, and I guess that's everything you need to know. Hope you enjoyed that little voiceover, because I'm gonna have to do that for all the other clips that I decide to show.
Monologue is the reason why I'm obsessed with this movie. This whole backstory is never brought up again, and we never get much more mention about his dad or what Casper's childhood was like. This movie drops a pretty huge bundle of details and glosses over it like it's an afterthought. You cannot convince me that this backstory backstory wasn't a major focus in an earlier version of this script. We're told by Casper that ghosts start to lose their memories immediately after death.
I wonder why you don't remember anything. I guess because when you're a ghost, life doesn't matter much anymore. So you forget.
Ghosts have the choice to either move on to the afterlife or stay behind to complete whatever unfinished business.
I didn't go where I was supposed to go. I just stayed behind, so my dad wouldn't be lonely.
But the catch is that if you later decide to move on, you can't move on until that unfinished business is completed. Alright, you got that? Okay, cool. Moving along. Casper's dad, J.C. McFadden.
This is editing Maggie here. I need to take a moment to explain myself because for some reason I refer to Casper's dad as JC instead of JT for the rest of the video. They literally say his name in the movie and I had his name written in the script as JT. I don't know why I keep saying JC. Normally I would just put some text on screen to explain myself, but I feel like if I don't fully articulate this mistake and clarify, then everyone's gonna be like, oh, you're not a real Casper fan. Everyone look at the fake Casper fan and laugh. So there you have it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go crawl in a hole.
McFadden claimed that he was haunted by the ghost of his dead son, and that he invented a machine to bring him back to life. The Lazarus.
And when that became public knowledge, he was declared legally insane before being sent to a mental institution, where it is implied he passed away. And what was it that Casper said about his unfinished business? He didn't want his dad to be lonely. Well, his dad is gone. We get no mention of any siblings, and Casper barely acknowledges the existence of his mom, so it's possible she died shortly after he was born. And as you may have noticed, Casper is a ghost. The implication here is that Casper wasn't there at the time of his dad's death. So this would mean that when he died, Casper's dad did decide to move on to the afterlife. And if you're wondering, wouldn't bringing your son back from the dead be enough motivation to stay behind? Well, it's possible that he was alone in the asylum long enough for his memory to fade just from age. So by the time he died, he maybe didn't remember enough to give himself a clear reason to stick around as a ghost. In conclusion, it is no longer possible for Casper to complete his unfinished business. So Casper's trapped here for all eternity as a ghost, I guess. This isn't a stretch. I'm not jumping to any wild conclusions. Everything I just said is based on information that we're given explicitly through the movie, based on what is either said or shown to us. Like, at the very least, I'm not wrong. Anyways, Casper remembers the existence of the Lazarus, the machine his dad had been working on. So he decides to use it to make himself alive again so he can go to the party with Kat. And he shows her the way to the secret lab, which is through the secret passage called the Up and Atom machine.
I would hold on. Why? Tug. Casper.
Was this underground lab built around a lake? Either that, or JC went through the effort of installing a water feature just to hide the Lazarus. I gotta be honest, if I was a rich 19th century white man, I would also be tempted to hide my resurrection machine in my underground lab under mysteriously foggy water so it can be dramatically revealed. He did it for the aesthetic, and I can respect that. The villains just happened to be eavesdropping because they were conveniently at the right place at the right time, so they're able to walk in just when Casper is telling Kat everything about the Lazarus.
What is all this?
My dad's lab.
Kind of a slob, wasn't he?
Down here he could do whatever he wanted to. But no matter how busy he was, he would drop everything to play pirates with me.
And of course these two are interested in a machine that can raise the dead since they're already greedy villains. But on top of that, Kat points out the comically large vault on the wall, which Casper acknowledges without further explanation, as if it wouldn't be the most obvious place to put something of high value.
What about that?
That? Nah, that's the vault.
The vault is of no use, and you were stupid to think otherwise. Now, they don't have any way of knowing for sure that it's actually gonna work, since Casper's dad had died before he could give it one last test run, knowing later on that the elixir does end up working. It's unfortunate to think that JC actually made a working resurrection machine. Like, he was that close. All he had to do was, like, actually test it one last time and maybe write down the recipe. After getting this information, Kerrigan then has the brilliant plan for her and Dibs to off themselves so they can become ghosts. But you know, the problem with that is that only one person can be brought back, so who's gonna take one for the team? So Kerrigan proceeds to try and murder Dibs, but accidentally kills herself instead.
Dibs, you're taking this way too personally.
Oh yeah, and this whole time, Dr. Harvey has been working through his subplot of trying to get the ghostly trio through therapy sessions. The thing is that they never make any progress. They just become slightly less mean for no clear reason. While Kat and Casper have been figuring out the Lazarus, Dr. Harvey has been out drinking with the ghostly trio, and they start to grow fond of him, so they consider killing him so they can all be ghost buddies.
You know what? Don't tell that lady. You aren't going anywhere. It's your house. You're haunting it.
No. Yes. No. Yes. What a sweetheart. We are going to clean out every bar this town has got. Come on. Come on.
And now Kerrigan is a CGI ghost. Just when they're finally about to get the Lazarus to do the thing, she pops in and declares her evil scheme. And in response to this, Casper and Kat just leave the room. I guess the writers couldn't think of any other way to transition between these scenes. Just when they get back in the house, Kat's class shows up for the party.
Perfect.
She then welcomes them inside before leaving the room to return to the lab with Casper.
Come on in. This is the room. Stay together. You'll be safe, and I'll be right back.
Now we finally get back to the Lazarus, but our main characters are somehow surprised that Kerrigan is trying to use it, even though she just explained everything before they left the room. Did they think that if they just stepped out for a few minutes that the bad guys would eventually just leave?
Dibs, get this thing cooking, you flaccid little worm, you. Aw, Kerrigan, how kind of you to drop in. You know, if there's one thing I've learned from you, it's always kick 'em when they're down. And baby, you're 6 feet under.
Surprise twist ending. Dibs betrays Kerrigan.
I got the power. I got the treasure. And you've got a flight to catch.
I can only assume that he is now a CGI ghost as well.
And now, thanks again to Universal, I need to improvise the whole scene where they trick Kerrigan into crossing over into the afterlife by making her admit that she has unfinished business. They basically are like, hey, all ghosts have unfinished business. And she's like, not me. I have no unfinished business. But see, that tricks her. And so that makes her cross over. And then she blows up, which you'll see in just a second. Yeah, there it goes.
After the CGI Kerrigan explosion, it's revealed that the treasure was actually just Casper's old baseball that was signed by his favorite player. Let's take a quick time out. You see, it was explained earlier that Casper used to play pirates with his dad, and he would leave clues around the house for Casper to find. The message on the deed from earlier in the film was just a part of some fun little game. Just a cute little scavenger hunt. Let me remind you, Casper's dad was a literal genius who successfully invented immortality, and he wrote a message as a game meant for a 12-year-old in invisible ink that could only be activated by heat on the back of the only existing copy of the deed to his mansion. He expected his 12-year-old son to figure out how to activate invisible ink with a chemical reaction induced with fire. You know, with those parenting skills, it's actually kind of impressive that Casper lived to be 12. But when Casper is finally able to use this resurrection sauna, we're interrupted yet again when the ghost of Dr. Harvey shows up.
What have you done to him? Nothing. He's just a little dead. Who's the girl? Dad, it's me, Kat. Don't you remember? Yeah, I remember. No, this. It's a callback to that thing from the beginning of the movie.
Casper gives up the only opportunity to be alive again for Kat's dad.
You need this more than I do.
Because even though it'd be pretty dope to hang out with her as an alive human being, it would kind of suck if she was an orphan, so...
This is the way it's gotta be.
And after all of that, Kat just casually goes to the Halloween party wearing Casper's dead mom's dress to awkwardly hang out as a teenager does. Meanwhile, Casper is moping around until Kat's mother decides to pop in.
That's right. Kat's mom?
I don't know why she's the only ghost in this movie that isn't CGI.
Are you an angel?
That was a very noble thing you did tonight, Kat.
She avoided the question, and out of nowhere, she grants Casper's wish to be alive.
But it's just for tonight. It's sort of a Cinderella deal. So I have until midnight? 10. Hey, Cinderella got until midnight. Cinderella wasn't 12 years old. Then we get the weirdest kiss in cinematic history.
Boo?
And the end.
Hi, I'm back, and you can probably tell that there's a little bit of a difference in setup and general visual quality. I've been having to film using my good old-fashioned iPhone 11, and it doesn't have the best of the camera quality, despite how it was originally advertised back in the day. Am I saying that this is better? No, but this does have more storage. And so I've been filming these different sections of the video on different days, because I'm a college student, and I don't have the time to sit down for an entire day. And also, so far from like the raw footage that I've edited, so far this video essay is 50 minutes long, and we're not even halfway through yet. So I'm starting off pretty strong if this continues to be a thing with me making video essays. Who knows? It depends on how well this does. Now that I've had all of that thoroughly explained, let's continue on, shall we? The movie ended up being a pretty big success in the box office. It raked in over $287 million worldwide, which is a little over twice the amount of the production's original budget, which was around $55 million. And even though there was a lot of talk about immediately doing a sequel, what was going to be a sequel ended up becoming a spin-off cartoon series. And I have many things to say on that, but we'll get to it in just a bit. I got curious after finding out about this sequel that never happened. So naturally, I started doing more research and once again fell down a rather ridiculously long rabbit hole. And so I ended up finding out about some stuff that happened behind the scenes of the original movie. And oh boy, are there some things to unpack. So the first thing that I found during this investigation was this documentary that I think was meant to be like a thing for the movie's 10th anniversary. I'm not entirely sure what the occasion was for, but it looks like some time has passed because the voice of Casper, who was 12 at the time that the movie was made, it cuts back and forth from him being 12 to him being like 20. I can't tell you for sure whether or not I would recommend giving this a watch. The entire thing is chock full of this weird tension between a lot of the actors, and it's all just, it's weird. It has a very weird aura surrounding it. One of the main things that I think adds on to the awkwardness is this ongoing bit in which they pretend that Casper is like a real actor that they all worked with and that he is also a diva.
Well, Casper comes to work and everybody kind of stands still and good morning, Casper.
I mean, he's the headliner on this thing, and I've been told that he gets sensitive.
We all hear horror stories, tantrums, excessive demanding.
He was a nice enough guy, but, that Hollywood act, I couldn't see right through him.
And yeah, I get that the joke is supposed to be, oh, he's Casper the friendly ghost, but he's actually a nightmare to work with. I get it. I understand. They just beat that dead horse into the ground till it was 6 feet under, and then they got out the Lazarus to resurrect it so they could beat it into the earth again.
He's kind of driving the makeup people crazy. He's obsessive about this pale thing.
The joke goes on for way too long. Like, this doesn't at all feel like a natural inside joke. I just know that whoever directed this documentary, or maybe it was some executive behind the camera who was like, okay, so now that we just wrapped up your portion of the interview, how about before you go, you tell a cute little anecdote about that one time when Casper threw a tantrum because the intern didn't make his latte decaf. And then the actor is like, you've been pushing this bit for so long that everyone in the entire cast is starting to believe that you might think Casper is real. What? That's so silly. Me believing Casper? No. Alright, then I'm just gonna head out now. No. You're not going anywhere. Wait, what? Or at least not until you do the bit. Whoa, oh, okay guys, he's actually crazy. Oh yeah, you think I'm crazy? How about you tell that to my little ghostly friend? This documentary credits Deanna Oliver and Sherry Stoner as the screenwriters and Brad Silberling as the director.
Stephen, when he got an inkling to try to put this project together and thought it was a great idea to do Casper, sought out the talents of Deanna Oliver and Sherry Stoner.
They try to make it seem like these three were involved in the project from the beginning, but there are a couple of details that kind of contradict this timeline that they're trying to stick with, and most of these details appear to be related to one individual who isn't spoken of nor seen in the documentary.
The director that we had on the film left the project, and I called Brad. He was my next phone call.
I was in Oahu, and I got sort of a 911 phone call from Amblin.
And I said, are you interested in feature films? I think I have your first feature.
But after doing a little bit of research, and by that I mean I just looked up Casper 1995 on IMDb. As it turns out, the original writer and director of the movie was Alex Proyas. which was kind of a weird choice since up until Casper, he had only written and directed what I believe were like action movies. This genre doesn't exactly fall within the genre of stuff that I prefer to watch. I'm the one who's making an entire video essay about Casper the Friendly Ghost, if that says anything about my personal taste. Having that said, I obviously don't know enough about these movies to tell what level his skills are at, like directorial wise, but just looking at the covers and the vague summaries, you can kind of get the general vibe. I'm pretty sure that the only feature film he directed in the 90s was The Crow, which was released in 1994. I just can't imagine sitting in an interview and having someone go over my resume and be like, so what movies have you worked on before? And I'm like, The Man on the Corner of the Street, The Body Hidden Under the Floorboards. Oh yeah, and what was that last one that you put there? Casper the Friendly Ghost. I cannot fathom what the original draft for Casper 1995 must have been like. And speaking of which, if anyone watching this has any knowledge on this kind of stuff, I'm begging you to help me access the original draft, or like one of the earliest versions of the Casper 1995 screenplay, or Mr. Alex Proyas, the man himself. If you are watching this, first off, big fan, please do me a solid. If you know how I can get my hands on the earliest existing copy, tell me how I can get my hands on it. Because at this point in my life, a point in which I've spent 3 out of my 20 years of life working on a Casper video essay, finding that script is going to be my unfinished business. I ended up finding an interview on CBR.com where Alex talked about some of his experiences while working on Casper, and this is what he said in response. In retrospect, it was a big mistake. The fact that I didn't get through the film makes it clear that it was. And what's interesting about this is how genuine he sounds about getting the chance to direct a family film for the first time. In this interview, he keeps going back to The Wizard of Oz as an example for the kind of thing that he would want to make for a family audience, which is honestly pretty basic and vague, but he's got the spirit. Saying that you want to direct a family film that is an instant classic like The Wizard of Oz is like saying, yes, I would like to make a very emotional movie like Titanic. He also mentions that he hasn't really done a lot of screenwriting in his career, so he was a little bit uncertain about writing the script in the first place, which just adds on to the towering pile of questions as to why he was apparently the first person considered for the job. And within that same interview, Alex expresses his disappointment in how the final film turned out, describing it as lacking in depth and failing to deliver on its emotional beats. Based on my research and the context that I've gathered through these interviews, I believe that when Alex was working on the film, things started to go down south when Steven Spielberg stepped in, and he started making some changes that became pretty drastic because he thought it would make it into a more family-friendly movie, and those changes mainly included slapstick and visual gags. Just so many of them. To quote the man himself, unfortunately, it started to move away from its potential at some point, and that's the reason I politely bowed out. And when Alex finally stepped away from the project, it was at an incredibly crucial time in the production process, around the time when everything is moving from like concepts and development to all being like finalized. And even though I can't begin to imagine how frustrating it must have been to have to work during this kind of situation, it's kind of funny to hear the crew talk so passive aggressively about Alex.
It was certainly last minute, let's put it that way.
It was after losing both the writer and director that Steven Spielberg approached Deanna Oliver and Sherry Stoner to step in and complete the unfinished screenplay. Personally, based off of my professional observations of the Casper franchise, I believe that this was a terrible decision that ultimately led to a major turning point in the franchise and its future. And to answer the question as to why I think it was such a bad decision, these two had no previous experience in filmmaking. The reason why Oliver and Stoner were originally picked was because they had worked as writers on Tiny Toon Adventures. I'm not saying that they're bad writers. Deanna and Sherry are obviously talented. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been picked by Steven Spielberg. I guess it makes sense if he had been like recently talking to them and they showed that they were good at working with cartoon characters. But the approach for writing cartoons, such as Steven Spielberg's Tiny Toon Adventures, it's pretty different from writing for a movie. They were both interviewed in the documentary and went on to explain their creative process.
Well, I think the cartoon background helped us explore all possibilities in a space. That's what you do when you write cartoons. You say, I'm in this space, what possibly could a character make use of in this space. And so our minds were real open to that kind of thing.
So essentially, their approach was almost entirely based on the visual aspects rather than the actual story. It's obviously meant to be heartfelt and like genuine and stuff, but it's hard to take those emotional scenes seriously because these emotional scenes barely hold any weight since they aren't really utilized for character arcs hardly at all, and we're not even really given much time to process any of it in between jokes. It's just all over the place. You do realize that it's possible to pull off comedy without slamming the brakes on the plot just for one joke. We don't have time to laugh at Casper being thrown into orbit. There's a secret lab in the basement. The approach to the writing in this movie makes it feel a lot less like a Casper movie and a lot more like a 90s coming-of-age movie guest starring Casper the Friendly Ghost. With all of this information in mind, when you go back to watch the movie, it's almost painfully obvious which scenes were closest to the original take and which ones were given the most of the Spielberg treatment. Like with the main characters, Kat and Dr. Harvey, there's an interesting dynamic that's introduced to us in which Kat is having to take on this slightly more mature role since her dad is fixated on the possibility of finding the ghost of his wife. It almost makes you think at first that Kat's arc is going to be about like letting herself feel sad over losing her mom and learning that it's not her responsibility to put on a strong face for her dad. But we never really get to see just how much the loss of her mom has affected Kat. We get maybe like 2 minutes of her talking about it, and Dr. Harvey's arc is, I don't know, it's decent, I guess. I don't really know what you can do with the dead lover who the protagonist can't let go of trope that hasn't already been done. And also, I kind of don't like how he ends up finding his wife as a ghost in the end. I don't know, it's something about characters having a specific goal that's obviously not good for them, but they still end up like achieving that goal in the end. It doesn't feel as satisfying. She does kind of tell him, like, dude, I know that I died, but get over it. Like, I don't know. It could have been slightly better. Moving on to the ghostly trio, we don't really see them interact with Casper that much, but when we do, Casper is thrown around and treated like a servant. It's all very reminiscent of Cinderella, and that right there is actually an interesting dynamic that could be explored. But do we have time for that? Can we focus on it for even just a little bit? No? Okay, that's fine. The ghostly trio had a lot of potential to help build on to Casper's backstory and maybe like contribute just a little bit more to the plot. Anytime that they were involved in any Casper media up until the movie, they had always filled somewhat of an antagonistic role in the stories, but it was painted in a way that's like, but at the end of the day, family is family. And even though we're jerks who are like actually within canon referred to as being abusive, we're not really that bad. Maybe there was 1 or 2 times in which we stuck up for our nephew, and apparently that was enough to redeem us forever. Like, I enjoy the ghostly trio, or I guess mainly just the concept of them. It's pretty rare to find them in a Casper show or movie in which they're actually like genuinely entertaining. They're either mildly entertaining at best or insufferable at worst. They have some bits that I very much enjoy, like that one part in the movie when they're going, "It's my party and I'll die if I want to."
You will die too when it happens to you.
What is the point of these three? They don't do anything. Why are they in this movie? If you cut out the parts of the movie whenever they're on screen, you wouldn't be missing out on the actual plot unless you're just really stoked to see Fatso with boobs. And before I wrap up this section of the script, I gotta talk about Casper's arc. And by doing that, I can't not address human Casper, which also leads me into another talking point. Why did the writers think Casper needed a love interest?
Instead of just him wanting a friend, him falling in love with the
girl who is his friend.
I admit that I thought that this was the peak of romance when I was a kid, but watching it now as an adult, it's just weird. I don't like it. I just don't understand why they thought that putting Casper into a romantic relationship was some kind of an upgrade for him. Forget about all that friendship junk. It's time for Casper, the flirty ghost. The millennials watching this are probably like, but I love that scene because human Casper, he was my first movie celebrity crush. How could you not like that scene? scene. First of all, Casper is 12, and Kat's age is never entirely clarified. I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be like 14. I mean, that was the same age that Christina Ricci was around the time of filming, and I do realize that if she is in fact supposed to be 14, that's only like a 2-year age gap. But it's something about the way that the characters are portrayed that rubs me the wrong way. Christina's character could be interpreted to be like 14 or 15. Meanwhile, Casper looks and sounds like this. And so despite it being 2 years, it feels like a pretty drastic age gap. And now I would like to talk about the casting for human Casper. Let's break this down. I love how he's dressed in a way that's definitely intended to be reflective of the time period that he might have died in, but they couldn't bother pinpointing a specific decade, so it comes across as more of like a Victorian era pirate. Casper's voice actor, Malachi Pearson, was actually 12 years old at the time that the movie was filmed, and also definitely could have passed as a human Casper.
When I was in 4th grade, I used to come home and watch Casper cartoons. When they first see Casper, they usually go, "Ghost!" That's what they usually do. But he's nice.
Like, I feel kind of bad for him. He probably read the script and was like, wow, I get to have my first on-screen kiss with Christina Ricci? And then someone had to break it to him, like, no, actually, we're gonna get an entirely different person specifically for that.
We're real lucky because we found Malachi Pearson. He turned out to be a real good Casper voice and has given the character a lot of life.
He is Casper as far as I'm concerned. He really embodies the spirit and the savvy and the great charm and enthusiasm of Casper.
It's just so bizarre to hear Casper's voice go from this to that.
She'd never forget you. Can I keep you?
I told you I was a good dancer.
Can I keep you?
When Kat's mom granted him his wish, did that include being smooth? From a storytelling perspective, I don't think that it works for Casper to get the girl in the end. Throughout the entire movie, it feels a lot more like a very innocent, unrequited crush. I personally think that the relationship between Kat and Casper works better more so as a parallel to Casper's character arc, you know, since his childhood was cut short by a tragic accident. And then after spending like a whole century just alone in this giant mansion, Casper gets his first genuine friend, but then it kind of rubs salt in the wound to see her getting to experience all the things that he'll never get to have. Like the main example from the movie, getting to go to a school dance. So while Casper may be interpreting that as a crush, the actual reason why he feels drawn to her is because he's kind of getting to live vicariously through her. And so like in his mind, she is like associated with the thing that he wants the most, which is the opportunity to just be a kid. And rather than ending that arc on a bittersweet note, in which Casper basically just has to accept that he's never going to get back what he lost, the story completely backtracks and does this. It's sweet, I guess, but it's such a cheap shortcut to a happy ending. Don't get me wrong, the kid needed closure, but not by smooching. And what about Kat? She never expressed interest in dating Casper. If anything, their dynamic feels much more like adopted siblings, especially in the spinoff series, which once again, we'll be getting back to that later. And so, like, when you examine their relationship and how everything plays out beforehand, the kiss just doesn't feel right. I know that I just spent quite a lot of time listing just about every single detail that I hate about this movie, so I'm gonna balance out that negativity by giving it a little credit. 3 credits to be exact. Number 1, if there's anything this movie did perfectly, it's the set design for Whipstaff Manor. So much thought was put into it, and it shows. How is this actually stunning? It's just perfect for Casper. What else is there to say? And since this set was later reused for the filming of the Backstreet's Back music video, it allows me to create this Venn diagram. Number 2, the CGI. For a while now, I've generally thought that the computer animation and special effects have aged like decently, but it was when I was watching the documentary that I discovered there was a CGI model of the Elixir prop. They had the regular like physical prop that they used for the actors, but whenever Casper was supposed to be holding it, they had a CGI model. How am I just now noticing this? How does this rendering actually hold up like insanely well? This was made in the mid-90s. How does it still look so good? This specific prop, it gets 1,000% rating. It's beautiful. And finally, number 3, I am obsessed with the character animation. Once again, in general, the CGI aged fairly well, and the models hold up decently, especially when you consider literally all of the other 3D models that were created for the franchise. Like the newer 3D models make the ones from 1995 look like frickin' Van Gogh. And so generally, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the computer graphics department for the Casper 1995 movie, and an even bigger shout out to this one animator in particular who And the documentary made so many bad Casper-related animation puns.
The process is usually called an animatic, but we laughingly call it a Casper-matic, which I guess makes me a Casper-mater.
Casper 1995 is a movie that I still enjoy, despite the problems that exist with its plot. I understand it was all for a reason, because when you're making a family movie with franchise potential, then you're obviously going to try to leave everything on a high note that's very much open-ended to make room for multiple sequels, taking into consideration the fact that this movie never got any theatrical sequels. I guess the joke is on them. After the success of the first movie, the studio immediately set out to start working on the sequel that never actually happened. The main reason why the movie never got a proper sequel is because the majority of the cast was ready to move out of the family genre, and so once the plans for the sequel began to tank, the idea was kind of repurposed into a spin-off cartoon series titled The Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper. And so now you're probably thinking, oh wow, Maggie, you seemed to love the movie a lot, and there's a cartoon series based on it. You must love that. Well, I don't. If anything, this might actually be my least favorite series out of anything in the franchise. I truly despise it. The first thing you notice upon watching this is that every character has been boiled down to having exactly one personality trait, and that one trait is kicked up to about 1,000%. Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso are exactly what you'd imagine. Dr. Harvey only speaks in random psychology terms.
She's obviously projecting an unresolved conflict. Honey, do you think maybe you're experiencing a manifestation of environmental adaptation syndrome?
Cat is a teenage girl.
Uh-huh. Whatever. Listen, Amber's having a party and everyone's invited but me. Not that I like Amber, but how am I gonna face them at school on Monday? It's humiliating.
And Casper. Where do I even start? Remember the title, The Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper? You may notice that the whole friendly ghost part has been completely discarded, and not just from the title. Back in the documentary, it was explained that the goal was to make Casper appeal to a modern audience, and to accomplish that, he had to be more sarcastic and sassy. Like, the way they talk about Casper in this documentary doesn't even sound like they're talking about Casper.
But what we've tried to do is to bring Casper into the 90s, to modernize him in a way.
This Casper has tude, you know, he's got attitude.
It was like about Casper the Friendly Ghost, but then had these really sarcastic twists to it, really biting kind of stuff.
It looks like that sass and sarcasm that they had in mind for the original movie was amped up as much as possible for the spin-off. As you can tell by Casper's catchphrase, I hate my afterlife. If any of the adults in the room are up for a fun drinking game, just put on The Spooktacular New Adventures and take a shot every time you hear that. It's not entirely recommended because you'll end up dead for sure. Casper in this spin-off is very snarky and portrayed as quick-witted with these random fourth wall breaks.
What's with him?
Fatso's right.
Huh? Must be new writers.
His personality, compared to the movie that this is supposed to be based on, is so different.
Sometimes I don't hate when that happens. Casper.
He's also really mean for no reason. He's somehow even more clingy towards Cat.
What am I gonna do by myself all day?
I don't know, but you're not coming with me.
Oh yeah? That's what you think.
The dynamic between Cat and Casper is even more like siblings, which makes it even more weird to remember that they were supposed to be love interests in the movie. And once again, I'm actually in favor of the siblings dynamic, but with the movie and the spin-off, I guess we can't have either. The two of them are just so obnoxious whenever they're in the same scene, because they're both just terrible.
What are you doing? Practicing playing the bagpipes. Duh.
Look, I have to do a book report on Moby Dick, cram for an algebra test, and write a creative story called I Enjoy Being a Girl, all by tomorrow. So bagpipe practice is definitely
a bad idea.
Good catch.
Everyone is mean. Also, kind of unrelated, but what was it with main characters in the 90s being mildly charismatic jerks? I don't really know what to call this trope, but it's something along the lines of white male main character who is a complete jerk all the time, but it's okay because he's funny and everyone else around him is stupid. As for one of the few tolerable characters, Dr. Harvey, he is now a full-time ghost therapist, which I don't think is a solid way to pay the bills. In the movie, Dr. Harvey was paid by clients to get the ghosts to leave their home through therapy. But in the spinoff, he's literally being a therapist for ghosts. Like, the ghosts are the clients.
Casper, I'm in a session.
That's no problem. I gotta go haunt Lisa Marie. What the heck is she thinking?
But they don't have money because they're dead. I may be a young adult who doesn't even have a full grasp on how taxes work yet, but I don't really think kicking the bucket is all that great for your credit score. But I guess, like, it's kind of, like, sweet if you think about it, that Dr. Harvey is just trying to help these ghosts out of the kindness of his heart, and totally not because the writers probably just didn't watch the movie. Two of the most prominent side characters are Spooky, aka Bowler Hat Casper, and Pearl, or Hoyle, aka Casper in a wig, who are both Casper's classmates, because yes, he also goes to school in this show. Spooky was originally introduced as Casper's cousin in what I think was like the 10th issue of the Casper the Friendly Ghost comics, but he's not portrayed as being Casper's cousin in this show. He's just supposed to fill the role of the classic schoolyard bully, with Pearl as his sidekick, and her whole character quirk thing is being so dumb that Spooky literally cannot handle it. Pearl was first introduced as Spooky's girlfriend in what was like Spooky's own little spin-off comic series that were all published sometime in the 50s. Out of all the other characters in the show, they're the only ones that I can tolerate, you know, like including Dr. Harvey. Also, Spooky is the superior ghost character in this show just because of the fact that he is voiced by Rob Paulsen.
As you jerks know, and you jerks know who yous is, the scariest scare wins the spookin' bee.
He serves his purpose. He may not have that much depth. He just has his weird nose and freckles and a hat and crippling anxiety over the fact that he's bald, and there's a whole episode about that. All of the ghost characters, including Casper and the ghostly trio, refer to humans using the term fleshies, referencing the movie in which they say it maybe like 2 times.
I love the smell of fleshies in the morning.
Big fleshy deal.
But from this point on, fleshies would go on to be included and used relentlessly in all future Casper movies and shows. I cannot stress enough how much they say it. Fleshies is essentially a slur for all humans, and after a while, if you binge an unhealthy amount of Casper content in one sitting, like I did, it sure does start to sound like a real one. To demonstrate how mean these characters can get, in Paranormal Press, Kat gets sent to detention because some girls get her in trouble while passing notes in class.
Jennifer has to see this. Pass it over. Right. Pass this to Jennifer.
What am I? The information superhighway?
And for whatever reason, she gets the option of either going to detention or helping out with the school paper. And so while she's helping out with the school paper, she gets the idea to start a gossip column so she can get back at the girls that got her in trouble. And so after getting this brilliant idea, she recruits Casper and asks him to dig up dirt on as many people as possible. And the little jerk doesn't even hesitate.
You want dirt? You dug up the right guy.
He still has the nerve to introduce himself to people as Casper the Friendly Ghost. How dare you pat yourself on the back and call yourself friendly? You can't do that. You just did the equivalent of doxing like several middle schoolers online. This entire series is very sitcom, very slice of life. You can forget about the Lazarus plotline from the movie because that never comes up again. I was really hoping going into it that this series would be about Kat and Casper encountering ghosts that show up and wreak havoc in the town, and they have to figure out how to stop the ghosts, or they have to help the ghost figure out their unfinished business. And maybe there's like these ghost gadgets that they can use in Casper's dad's lab, like Danny Phantom, but make it steampunk. That sounds like a good time, but no. Instead, we mostly see the characters hanging out around the mansion, or Kat goes to school, or sometimes Casper goes to school, and that's about it. And speaking of school, I don't know why Casper has to go to school so often in all of the shows. That's probably the only thing out of the entire franchise that's been consistent since the beginning. And God said, "Let there be light," and also make Casper go to school for the 87th time. In one school-related episode in this series, it's the time when Casper gets the most out of character that I've ever seen him. In the Spooking Bee, he gets very upset because he's trying to pass a scare exam, but everyone's making fun of him because, do I even need to say it?
Face it, Casper, you're just not actually scary. You're friendly. Well, Yeah.
But he wants to prove everyone wrong and that he can be scary. But it doesn't make any sense because, one, Casper already scares everyone half to death no matter what he does. That's been a running joke since the beginning of time itself. He doesn't even have to try. Casper could just spawn in a grocery store and his mere presence would make like 12 grown adults instantaneously wet themselves. If anything, wouldn't it make more sense for Casper to be considered a prodigy? And that would actually work a lot for his character since he doesn't want to scare people. Or at least the Casper I know doesn't want to scare people. It's like a lose-lose situation. And number two, even though friendliness has always been a pretty crucial character trait, this show is actively trying to abandon that branding because I guess just generally being a nice person wasn't considered hip in the 90s. A final point for this, the show constantly has Casper contradict himself by doing not very good things and just being like pretty rude from time to time. He still has himself convinced that he's like the friendliest person on earth. Like, is he supposed to be friendly or not? That's the thing about this show that upsets me the most. Literally just pick one. I could at least give you some credit for consistency. As frustrating as this episode is, I will admit it has what is by far the funniest joke that I have ever witnessed in any Casper thing.
Hello, I'm Casper. Wanna be my friend?
If no other piece of Casper media had ever been made after this episode aired, I wouldn't even be mad because the joke is that good. You know how I complained earlier about the movie and how it never addresses Casper's relationship with his uncles? Well, I was a little surprised by this next episode that I'm about to talk about because I had to rewatch it a couple of times to make sure that it wasn't like a dream. This little episode is titled Above the Law. It took me a shameful amount of time to recognize the pun in the title because in like every single Casper episode out of any of the series or any of the serieses, what's the plural for series? Serii? Out of anything in Casper, all of the episodes usually contain some kind of a terrible ghost pun. It's always been a delightful part of the franchise, but like most of the time in this show, it's just inserting boo into a regular word. Initially, I read this title as Above the Law, and I thought it was funnier when I read it like that. So yeah. Anyways, in this episode, Casper is finally fed up with his uncles and calls them out on their behavior. Literally, he uses the term abuse. And Casper gets a lawyer. He takes his uncles to court. I really wish I was making this up.
Floating before you today is a broken ghost. Look, broken! A small, harmless little bald-headed boy, driven to the breaking point by his evil uncle. Casper is a slave to his uncle's every wishing command. He's a regular Cinderfella. Won't you please let my client go?
I'll do my best.
This entire episode is insane because of the fact that people thought that this was like an okay idea for a kid's cartoon. What's even worse is that his uncles win the trial. It's ultimately decided that they are in fact the best caretakers for Casper because being mistreated by them is going to help him become better at scaring people.
We learned that even though being a bully is a ton of fun, it isn't right.
So from now on, things are gonna change.
We're gonna treat you with more respect.
Aw, gee, guys. You mean it?
The world building within the Casper universe is so strange because I guess when you die, you are like automatically in this society of ghosts where you are like legally obligated to scare humans. And the job of scaring humans, for some reason, includes being unnecessarily mean. That's like generally speaking. Even when they're not actively scaring humans, all of them are mean all the time. What does that accomplish within your society? I guess the ghost world just thrives on torture and chaos. This is starting to make me want to like construct a theory that the ghosts in Casper's universe are actually trapped in this dimension caught between Earth and Hell, and they are like bound to this stupid thing where they have to scare and torment people for all eternity. And maybe that's why Casper has to go to school. He has to learn how to be good at torturing humans because it's not actually scare school. This is demon school. This is a really stupid theory. This is the bad place. Finally, the last totally bizarre bizarre episode that I want to cover is Casper versus the ultimate fanboy. Casper convinces Kat to go with him to a comic book convention. He dresses up like a ghost by putting on a sheet so he can, you know, walk amongst other kids unnoticed.
Oh my gosh, it's a good girl!
Good call.
And of course, this is a comedy from the 90s, so almost all of the jokes in this episode are basically haha, nerds, nerdy, Star Wars, and Dragon Dungeon. The part when things get weird is when this guy kidnaps Casper because he is Casper's #1 fan. The actual Casper franchise exists within the universe of this show. Like, there's a ton of references to previous cartoons and stuff. This weirdo wants to keep Casper on display as his most prized collector's item. Were any of the writers on this show ever like tested for drugs? Like all of the drugs? Because how else do you explain this? This whole episode is like a copy paste of the Please 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 Get a Life Foundation from Animaniacs, which directs criticism towards its own fan base and demonstrates how being such an extreme fan can turn you into a buzzkill and can end up defeating the entire purpose of enjoying something in the first place. But you know, the difference between this episode and that bit from Animaniacs is that the Animaniacs one is actually good and is actually still pretty relevant today. This whole bit with the guy wanting to kidnap Casper because he's the ultimate fanboy. The whole joke is just comic book nerds are all weirdos and creeps. And there's no like actual criticism towards like fandom culture and stuff, which definitely deserves a lot of criticism, but it doesn't accomplish anything. The jokes are bad and it's weird. I don't like it. And before you start to say, oh, isn't it funny that you're criticizing the episode of Casper about the extreme Casper fan? Well, it's not at all an accurate comparison because unlike this guy, I like this franchise, but I don't love it enough to kidnap the main character. Especially not this version of him. This Casper is simply not worth my time to kidnap. The cherry on top of this whole dumpster fire is the way it's formatted in like the variety show style, which is very on brand for Steven Spielberg cartoons. But for the case of Casper, it doesn't really mesh well because, you know, what a variety show needs is variety. And besides the inclusion of some of the other like ghost characters, the cast for the Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper isn't very huge, and so there's not a lot of like dynamics and stuff that can be explored. They try to throw in some extra segments to try to make up for that, one of which that I actually do enjoy is The Ghostly Day, which is a loose retelling of the movie in a different style of animation. I like the art style and stuff. It's really cute.
At 9, I met Casper, a ghost and a friend. By 10, all the hauntings had come to an end. 11, I crashed. My dad tucked me in tight. And though it was 12 noon, Casper bid me good night.
This is adorable and I love it. The worst of the segments by far are, I don't even think that there's a lot of them, but there's occasionally a song from the Ghostly Trio. These are like supposed to be educational song numbers, like Wacko's America, but you know, the main difference is that these songs really aren't educational. I guess they were supposed to be funny because the Ghostly Trio is like messing everything up on purpose. One thing that this show does a lot is make fun of children's programming, stooping as low as to make fun of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Hello, neighbor. Do you want to go to the land of make-believe? Or we could visit the eraser factory and find out how they put them in the backs of pencils.
You think you can disrespect Mr. Rogers and get away with this? I do not understand the point. It doesn't make sense at all for the tone of the show. Do you know why educational song numbers work in Animaniacs? Animaniacs establishes itself from the get-go as pretty laid-back, wacky, no rhyme or reason to anything. The show only exists to fit in as many wacky, over-the-top segments as possible. There is no set premise for the plot. It's just the Warners doing shenanigans. They're just messing with people even outside of time and space. There was even a whole segment where the joke was the fact that they had no intention of like making the effort to do episodes that contained moral values.
Hey, come on! The Wheel of Morality adds boring educational value to what would otherwise be an almost entirely entertaining program.
Then the show occasionally takes a 180. And it gives you these actually good educational song numbers. And it works because it's unexpected, it's ironic, and the songs are actually good. I love it because these characters are like, we don't care about teaching kids anything of value, really. Wait, they have to learn their multiplication tables on their own in a way that isn't fun and or theatrical. Over my dead body. I vividly remember when my 5th grade teacher played Wacko's America when we were all learning the 50 US capitals and states. And I'm pretty sure it's still very common practice for most teachers to use that song in classrooms to this day. But for Casper, it doesn't make sense for these songs to exist. They do not educate and they are not funny. So either way, they aren't getting the job done. My last bone that I have to pick with this series, there's a little joke hidden in the background of one episode where at a movie theater on the marquee, the actors from the original live action movie are credited. But you see, what's funny is that Malachi Pearson, the voice actor for Casper from the 1995 movie, returned for the spinoff to continue to voice Casper. He's the one who's been playing this version of Casper, and he's not even like given that credit in his own spinoff. Like, what? It says Gaslight? Like, is this some kind of joke to you? It's been a few weeks since I've sat down to continue recording for this video, and I just realized going back to edit that I was wearing completely different glasses than how the video started. I don't know if you noticed, but I apologize wholeheartedly for prioritizing my blue light filtering glasses to save my eyesight, other than the glasses that best fit the aesthetic that I'm going for at the moment, which of course is the same aesthetic as Dr. Harvey. I also don't know how obvious it is that I dyed my hair recently. You know, let's just forget consistency. Who needs it? Moving forward, once the Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper was no longer airing, the next thing to come out of the franchise was a straight-to-video movie titled Casper Meets Wendy, which was a live-action crossover between Casper and another Harvey Comics character, Wendy the Good Little Witch. As you can tell by Wendy's full name being the Good Little Witch, there's a bit of a pattern going on between our two protagonists. The story takes place at this resort where all of the characters wind up, leading Casper and Wendy to cross paths. The reason why Wendy ends up at the resort is because of the main villain, Desmond Spellman.
Hi, I'm calling from the International Children's Fund, and we're asking generous people like you to donate any...
He is hands down the best character in this entire movie, and personally my favorite villain out of the entire Casper franchise. I actually don't know whether or not he is like from the Casper comics. I don't remember. Hold on. I'm just gonna Google this. We're gonna Google it together. Desmond Spellman. Wait, no, I lost the Wikipedia page. Come back. Okay, let's see. Pulling up the full Wikipedia article. Desmond is an evil warlock with mastery over both sorcery and alchemy, who has enjoyed a luxurious and wealthy lifestyle for a very long and undetermined number of years, and settling down in his mansion while remaining the most feared and greatest conjurer in the world. Desmond Spellman is the only main villain in the Casper films that does not have any vendetta or motivation against Casper and the Ghostly Trio, with his goal being to destroy Wendy and her aunts. I guess he only appears in Casper Meets Wendy, which is a shame because this dude is the best. Man, I love this guy.
Call upon the dark forces of yada yada yada, the power vested in me, etc., etc. Open the door.
I guess since I just read that, you just got a little bit of his motivation in the Wikipedia article. But in case that wasn't clear enough, Desmond Spellman finds out that Wendy is the most powerful witch, but he wants to be the most powerful witch. So naturally, he just decides, I guess I have to kill her. Wendy's aunts decide that they're gonna hide out at this resort for who knows how long. Meanwhile, Casper and his uncles arrive at the resort because they want to go on vacation. Yeah, I guess you could say the stakes are a little bit uneven for our two main characters. And the plot is just about what you'd expect, as implied in the title. Casper meets Wendy. That's what happens. Once Casper and Wendy meet for the first time, we get this weird piece of world building where we find out that witches despise ghosts for no discernible reason. And ghosts are just terrified of witches.
But why do you scare them?
Because they can't scare back.
Except for witches. What's wrong with witches?
Wake up and smell the coffin. Witches are fleshies with power.
Ghosts can kind of do magic. They can make things float and stuff, but I don't know what kind of harm witches would be able to do to ghosts, because ghosts are already dead. So yeah, none of it makes any sense. Really, the only thing that this weird rivalry between witches and ghosts does in the plot is it results in, I guess, an enemies to lovers arc arc between Casper and Wendy, but like a speed run. They literally go from having this standoff to flirting with each other in less than like 1 minute.
Are you really a witch?
Yeah, what of it?
I just didn't know witches were so cute.
So, of course, they end up getting crushes on each other, and then towards the end of the movie, Casper and Wendy end up slow dancing under the gazebo. If I had a nickel for every time Casper slow dances with the other main character, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
I told you I was a good dancer.
I don't dance very good.
And believe it or not, this movie actually used to be my favorite out of all of the Casper movies. I think it was just something about Hilary Duff having cool magic powers. I was also obsessed with the Sabrina the Teenage Witch sitcom at the time, so I think it just combined all of my favorite things into one. And now that I've finally gone back to watch it, this movie is pretty annoying. The main thing that drives me crazy, which goes for all movies that include this plot point, is the second act falling out between the two characters because of a miscommunication and they get mad at each other. But of course, Casper goes back because Wendy is about to die and he saves her. And that's it. Really, the only other notable thing about this movie is the fact that it was Hilary Duff's first on-screen lead role, so that's pretty cool. And next up, we have Casper, A Spirited Beginning. In the first scene of this movie, Casper is like freshly dead. The implication is that he passed away and then woke up on this ghost train.
That's it. I'm having a nightmare. Wake up, Casper. Come on, snap out of it.
And the poor kid doesn't know what's going on. He's like going around this train trying to ask people where he is, but everyone is being super mean to him. He's like asking actual logical questions that no one else is asking. Like everyone else on the train is either just chill with the fact that they're on a ghost train or they're like too busy also freaking out. Eventually, after pestering people to try and ask what the heck is going on, Casper gets kicked off the train, literally.
What are you trying to do? Kill me?
I guess you could say this movie is already off the rails.
Ghost. I am the ghost!
Our other protagonist is this kid who has a very stereotypical business dad who is too busy to spend quality time with his kid. He's like, oh yeah, my 10-year-old son is perfectly independent and mature for his age, so who needs an emotionally available father? I'll admit, it's been like a year since I rewatched this movie, but I'm pretty sure the kid like stumbles upon the house that Casper and his uncles haunt, and they become friends, and you get the point. Shenanigans happen. I don't remember anything else about the plot. Aunt Becky was there. Was she that desperate for a check in between filming seasons for Full House? I would definitely say that this movie is better than Casper Meets Wendy, just with overall quality, with like filming and writing. The bar was already pretty low, but this movie is decent. Out of any of the other spin-offs, I guess this is the only other one that I would recommend besides the original movie to throw into your Halloween movie marathon. And before I move on, this movie has the superior version of the Casper theme song, and I am willing to die on that hill. I don't think I want to go full in depth on every single Casper spinoff. I simply do not have the strength within me. If this video does do well, I will consider reviewing every single Casper movie in depth with a full analysis and everything. Let's say if this video gets to 10,000 likes, yeah, 10,000 likes, I will review every single Casper movie ever. Even though I just talked about how I have no intention of talking about the other spin-offs, I will talk about Casper Scare School just for 1 minute, because there is one detail in the Casper Scare School movie that I cannot stop thinking about. This has kept me up at night. Dare I say, it's been haunting me. For those unaware of Casper Scare School, if you couldn't tell by the title, Casper has to go to scare school in this movie. And of course, all schools need a principal, but the principal in this movie is actually principals. plural, because this principal is a two-headed monster, and they spend a good portion of this movie concocting a plan to assassinate the King of Ghosts. Stay with me here. I don't remember entirely why. I think they just don't like him. And when Casper and his buddies find out, they decide that they have to stop the principals, because if they kill the King of Ghosts, then that'll upset the natural balance. There's like a whole thing with monsters and ghosts having to scare humans in order to maintain this balance, like the Force, but with scaring. And so in order to stop them, Casper finds out their whole villain origin story by talking to their aunt and uncle.
Alder liked magic tricks.
Dash just loved music. They're nothing like that anymore. What happened to them?
The aunt and uncle are the same species as their nephews. How are they the principal's aunt and uncle? How does it work? If you exist in this universe as one of these two-headed creatures, is the other head like your sibling by default or your spouse by default? I don't understand. I don't like what this could possibly be implying, and I'm gonna try to stop thinking about it. My voice is getting like super croaky. I need some water. Hold on. I'm so close to finishing this video. Now, in our Casper timeline, we have officially made it to present day. And as of now, there hasn't even been a whisper of another Casper reboot or revival. And that means that for the first time ever in history, we have gone a full decade without a new Casper movie or TV series. Ever since the mid-2000s, the Casper franchise seemed to be in this decline up until Casper's Scare School. And not to blame everything on Casper's Scare School, but I would argue that it was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for the death of the franchise. And now that we've reached the conclusion of this journey, it's time to finally answer the question, what exactly caused the downfall of this franchise? Based off of my literal years worth of research, all signs are pointing to none other than the 1995 live-action movie. And I can hear the gasps in the theater as we speak, as you are obviously baffled by the fact that I'm pinning all of this on what I've established as my favorite existing piece of Casper media. A film that I believe is so superior, that has the capability of redeeming all of the other garbage that exists in the franchise. I know, this is a tragedy. The one thing we least suspected, the one thing we all loved and cherished the most, stabbed us right in the back. But why? Well, it all adds up. Going back to the aftermath of the movie's release, it did so well in the box office that if it wasn't for the main cast losing interest, we could have had multiple official sequels. And so when that first sequel didn't work out, we got the next best thing, the Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper, which, despite my strong opinions on it, it was fairly successful during its run. I mean, it did go on for like 4 seasons, I'm pretty sure. And after that series came to a close, studios turned to the cheaper option of straight-to-video movies, but the popularity of those began to wear out once the next decade rolled around and we entered the current era of television. And I'd rather not discuss what happened after that. So now that we've laid all of that out, let's take a closer look. Even though the Spooktacular New Adventures was drastically different from the movie as far as the story goes, the characters and setting were still recognizable enough to tie in directly with the movie. And the show was also targeted more towards a family audience rather than primarily towards younger children. And once the franchise transitioned into the early 2000s, the characters from the first movie and the spin-off were completely abandoned. Casper was basically turned back into his default form from before the 90s era because Casper was once again being targeted towards an even younger audience. And so the 90s iteration of Casper officially came to an end, and the franchise pretty much completely fell out of mainstream pop culture. The 1995 movie and its spin-off was by far the most successful that the franchise had ever been. This movie appealed to a wider age range because of an intriguing mystery and adventure-oriented plot, which was a product of an even more complex story that was left unexplored. Imagine living in a different timeline where we had a whole official Casper trilogy, and possibly even more cartoons and spin-offs based off of that trilogy. But sadly, this version of Casper was abandoned altogether, leading to both the franchise and its main character being turned into the cheapest product possible catered to toddlers, because that's all studios could think to do in order to make a profit. I hate to say it, but the first movie was literally too good for a Casper movie, to the point that the franchise basically collapsed in on itself. Or more accurately speaking, studios seemed to miss the entire point of the first movie and what made it successful in the first place. The way this franchise franchise died out is best described as a weird and painfully long roller coaster. When you look at the last and most recent era of the franchise, you can see that the modern quality has already aged not so well in comparison to where it originated. The last show, the series which shall not be named, since that show did so much damage in regards to how the character and franchise is now perceived by the vast majority, I doubt that we're gonna be seeing a new reboot anytime soon. He died an awkward death. We did not appreciate him while he was here. May he rest in peace. Oh no, please, I can't do this. My heart can't handle it. So this is the exact opposite of the problem that I have with the last era of the original franchise. Or I guess they are two sides of the same coin. At first, they made Casper as dumbed down and family friendly as possible. But now, they're going full throttle and turning Casper into a dead, angsty teen. Isn't seeing the words Casper and Riverdale in the same sentence enough of a red flag? Here's why neither of these two concepts work. What makes Casper so iconic is the gimmick. Going back to way earlier in this video, the whole point of Casper, like the very foundation of his character, is irony. Ghosts are the most iconic and traditional antagonist in all scary stories and horror movies. But we're talking about a ghost who's just a lonely kid looking for a friend. Yet he seems kind of doomed to spend eternity alone. Casper subverts this very classic trope in a way that is as depressing as it is wholesome. These are the things that make Casper what he is, both as a story and a character. Isolation and feeling disconnected from others, or even yourself. A focus on coping with grief and sadness, or sometimes even death. Learning how to navigate new relationships, whether it be platonic or romantic, from a child's perspective. If you are trying to reboot Casper without using all three of those elements and themes, it's just not going to be Casper. My main concern with a Riverdale type of Casper reboot is the same concern that I have with human Casper from the original movie. From my understanding, this live action reboot is meant to be much more adventure focused, which I'm actually all for. I'm all up for a good mystery, but it's also supposed to have a lot of focus on romance, meaning that the characters are more than likely going to have to be aged up quite a bit. It's all just so silly to me, because if you want an angsty romance about someone who falls in love with a ghost but can't be with them because they're a ghost, why do you need it to be Casper so badly? Now that I think about it, the 90s already did that one too. Literally just recycle the property of the movie Ghost and turn it into a limited TV series or something, and there you go. It's literally the thing that you're looking for, but without aging up a 12-year-old character. Do I really need to explain myself and why I'm uncomfortable at the idea of some writers aging up a character who is notoriously naive and childlike, and the motivation behind aging up that character is so that way he can make out with a girl on screen? If you're thinking that I'm being overdramatic and that no writers would ever do that with Casper the Friendly Ghost, I'm assuming that you don't know what happens in the first season of Riverdale. If you make the decision to leave out everything that makes Casper the Friendly Ghost, then it may as well just be an entirely different character. It's fine to take inspiration, which is pretty much what you're doing. I just know for certain that this whole idea for this live action reboot originated when some millennial out there decided to rewatch the movie and got to the ballroom scene, and once the credits started rolling was like, howdy manager, oh boy do I have an idea for a pilot script. There's a delicate balance between a darker take on the story versus a full-blown dumb family comedy, and honestly I believe the first movie was the closest we ever got to getting that perfect balance. What that movie was able to demonstrate was Casper's greatest strength, which was the ability to resonate equally with children and adults by having the main focus on themes surrounding death and loss and learning to navigate the emotion and fear that goes hand in hand with it. Because if there's any fear that we all have in common, it's the fear of the unknown. If it wasn't for the excessive amount of slapstick and cutting back on the most interesting concepts the story had to offer, I think this movie could have truly been something special. Don't get me wrong, I love it for what it is, but I just hate seeing stories that are so close yet so far from being great. So, you know what they say, if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. I'm sorry, this is the part where my little microphone decided to just stop working and it starts making that weird like popping noise. I hate to break it to you. This is the best it's gonna get. And now, time to speed run my pitch for a Casper reboot, based on my expert knowledge. First of all, we're going with a fresh take. We're going darker, but not to the extent of Riverdale. I'm talking over the garden wall, at most. Visually speaking, I would love to see it kind of mimic the art style of the original cartoons. The best example of this style, hands down, is the Cuphead show on Netflix. Now that we've got the general vibe, let's talk about the plot. First, let me emphasize that Casper has no canon material. The closest we ever got to a canon storyline was the 1995 movie. It also has the most consistent details, which isn't saying a lot, but it's something. So we're keeping the movie plot, but we're scrapping Kerrigan and Dibbs. Outside of the main plot, this whole story will focus on the central characters and whatever it is that they're dealing with internally, similar to how the movie has Casper processing his memories, Kat being afraid of facing the future without her mother, and Dr. Harvey having to accept that his wife is gone. So we would get 3 different character arcs from 3 different perspectives: child, teen, and adult. Now to cover what we're all dying to know, the lore. With little to no canon to work with, I'm declaring everything I'm about to say as official canon, but still basing that off of the lore and world building in the movie, and only a few details from the other shows and spin-offs that support that lore. One burning question that a lot of conspiracy YouTubers can't seem to let go of is, when and how did Casper die? Within the context of the assumption that Casper as a character is based off of a real person, like an actual child who died. And if you weren't paying attention to the first half of this video, Casper originated from a children's storybook. And once again, he had no established backstory until the first movie. And also, Casper died from pneumonia. Now get out and take your dark childhood ruined theories with you. Even though most of those questions are addressed in the movie, one question still remains. When did Casper die? No need to worry or panic, for I have the answers. But before I present this information to you, what is it that we have to remember?
Casper has no canon storylines because the franchise is arguably bad and it's a dumb thing to fight over with strangers on the internet.
I'm already bracing myself in case some underground Casper fandom starts crawling out of the depths of the internet to yell at me. I have come to the conclusion that Casper died around late March of 1888. Why that specific month and year? Well, that was the time of the Great Blizzard, which according to Wikipedia was one of the most severe snowstorms recorded in American history, which mostly affected Maine and the surrounding areas. And the movie from 1995 takes place in the fictional town of Friendship, Maine. There was one thing that I forgot to mention, which is the fact that the movie was actually filmed in Camden, Maine. And in the articles that I found, Camden is listed as one of the towns that was especially affected by the Great Blizzard. And I also left out that the Great Blizzard lasted for 3 days, so canonically, Casper would for sure have died between March 11th and the 14th. Okay, wait, never mind, I'm stupid. I know that he wouldn't have died, like, instantaneously. I mean, like, I guess I was accurate before and that he would have died in late March. But that's not all. On top of the Great Blizzard, my theory is also supported by Whipstaff Manor. The set design was inspired by Antoni Gaudi, who was a very successful and well-respected Italian architect during his time. And at one point, around the 1880s, okay, I know I'm off by like 2 decades, but shut up, was commissioned to design a hotel in New York, which was never actually built, but that proves that he did have some influence in like that area of America at the time. Meaning that it makes sense for Whipstaff Manor to have been built just before or around the 1880s. Last but not least, it pains me to admit that the Spooktacular New Adventures actually supports my theory. There's one scene in an episode in which Casper is asked about his age, in which he responds that his 13th birthday would have been in April before he died, meaning that Casper would have been 12 years old when he died from hypothermia, which developed from pneumonia. I meant to say pneumonia that developed from hypothermia, which occurred because he stayed out sledding for too long during the Great Blizzard of March in 1888. Now, I'm awarding myself with a round of applause because, come on, if that is not the most solid evidence of Casper's canonical death, I don't know what is. I will take no criticism. I've been researching for this stupid essay since I was a junior in high school. Let me have this. Now that we've agreed on the fact that Casper died in 1888, this next detail is so important to me. This theoretical reboot version of Casper must, underline must, have an old-timey New York Boston accent, which is also sort of a throwback to the original cartoons. sounds, because it's really subtle, but the accent is there. And since he died in the late Victorian era, imagine this adorable little ghost kid throwing around old-fashioned slang that literally no one can understand because it's become so outdated and obscure. This is non-negotiable, this is a must, this is the law. And personality-wise, it's somewhere between how his character was originally portrayed back in the 1940s, with like a little bit of a mix of the 90s era of the character. And I mean that in a way that this version of Casper is very sweet and naive, very easily trusting. And even though he tries to be like positive and optimistic, he does express himself if he's ever like upset or frustrated. As for the ghostly trio, based on context clues, it's heavily implied that they are in fact Casper's biological uncles, or at least they had some kind of involvement in Casper's family. A wide majority of people seem to agree that the ghostly trio are like Casper's adopted uncles, but just logically speaking, I have to disagree with that because of how most of the time the ghostly trio treats Casper like a nuisance. Specifically the spin-off series in the 90s, they treat him as if they are legally obligated to take care of him. Just based on how they treat him in the movie and spin-off, it doesn't appear that they want the responsibility of taking care of him. In fact, it seems like something that they are very bitter over, if anything. Besides, there is actual evidence to support that they are in fact blood related to Casper. According to the movie's IMDb page, there was apparently a children's storybook that was released alongside the movie, which is rumored to have some images in it and a few lines of dialogue that were not included in the final version of the movie. And as far as I know, some of these deleted scenes and lines aren't available to see on like any bonus features or anything. So this book is literally the only proof that these things actually existed at some point. And according to my sources, this storybook supposedly has a picture of Casper's uncles before they were ghosts. I found the book on eBay, and I've flipped through these pages to try to find the images of Casper's uncles. These images are supposed to be from the attic scene, but when you get to the attic scene in the book, I cannot find anything. Like, I don't see anything in here, or at least there aren't any close-ups. It appears that I was lied to. I'll insert the image right here if I happen to stumble upon it when I'm editing this. There is not actually a picture of the ghostly trio in this book from when they were alive, but there is a line of dialogue. Casper suddenly remembered who he was. "I remember, I used to sneak up here way past bedtime and read Treasure Island," he exclaimed. He showed Cat pictures of his parents and his 3 uncles before they were ghosts. And there you have it. Not gonna lie, I do kind of feel like this was a waste of money. Was it worth it to get this just to prove my point? Yeah, but I don't know what to do with this. Like, the cover is kind of ugly. I don't know if I want this on display. But on the other hand, it's the only piece of Casper merchandise that I own, because historically speaking, Casper merchandise has always been pretty hideous. So I'll take what I can get. There you go, Casper. I'll put you next to MJ. Even outside of the book, there's also lots of different implications from the spin-off that proves that they are his biological uncles, so case closed. And once again, logically speaking, I think it makes the most sense, because in the movie, the way in which they reside in the mansion feels like they just kind of stopped by when they were alive and just kind of crashed in a way that's like, oh, we're just gonna stay here temporarily, but then they proceeded to just make themselves at home. But they were annoyed when they realized that they had to share space with their nephew. It's also my headcanon that Casper is the one who gave them their nicknames Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso. Like, when Casper was a little toddler, that's how he referred to them, and they were always super annoyed by it. But now that they're ghosts, they don't have a lot of memories of their previous life, but for some reason those nicknames stuck with them just because the names annoyed them that much. But now that's all that their identities have been boiled down to, which is directly linked with how much they are annoyed by their nephew's existence. And my best theory as to why they keep Casper around is because they basically somehow accidentally got themselves cursed to be stuck with him in the afterlife. Like, when their brother, or possibly brother-in-law, aka Casper's dad, was sent off to the mental institution, he was like, hey, please take care of Casper, my son, while I'm gone. And they were like, sure, we'll take care of your dead son. What is it with this guy? And even though the promise was very shallow, they basically accidentally signed themselves up for babysitting in the afterlife. And you know, I explained earlier in the video how Casper can't move on to the afterlife because it's literally impossible for him to complete his unfinished business, so he's just stuck in the mortal realm. That would mean that his uncles would be stuck with him, because as long as Casper is stuck there, they have to watch over him, so therefore they are stuck there too. And I think my theory makes a lot of sense as to why they treat Casper the way that they do with the Cinderella dynamic. I know that this is by far the most far-fetched thing that I've proposed so far, but I have my evidence, and it works. So with this canon backstory in mind, and what I said earlier about the kind of character arc that I would like to see for the Ghostly Trio, in this reboot, they would ideally be minor antagonists, but like only to the extent to where they would still be redeemable enough to have like a full-on redemption arc and stuff. And finally, we need an actual villain, and by creating this villain, we also need a plot device in order for the Lazarus plotline to make sense within the context of this story. My idea for this plot is to basically pull a Little Mermaid. Casper has been in this mansion, living alone with his uncles for like a century, and then main character shows up. I'll still refer to the main character as Cat, and then Cat shows up, and while getting to know Cat, Casper is like, hey, I'm kind of jealous that you get to live in actual life, and I've been stuck in a mansion as a ghost. Sure would be cool to get to be a kid. And going back to the Little Mermaid thing, Casper finds a way to where he gets to be alive, but only during daylight or something. And then there's a thing he has to do before midnight on Halloween, because obviously we need a dramatic deadline for a climax. But then once the sun sets, Casper is a ghost again. When first thinking of this, I was like, but how is this supposed to work? Because the Lazarus exists, but how would it be possible for Casper to like be bound to like a set of like magical rules? Like, how would I incorporate magic into this universe? Wait a minute. This is where Wendy the good little witch comes in. So Casper meets Wendy, trademark, and they become friends, and then Casper brings up his whole motivation to be alive again, and then Wendy is like, hey, I'm actually a witch and I know some stuff about magic, and there's this guy who I've heard of in town, and he just happens to run the obituary section of the newspaper and also like volunteers for maintenance at the local graveyard. I think that he knows a thing or two about like ghosts and like raising the dead and stuff. And Casper is like, sweet. And then this is where we get to recycle the best villain that I mentioned earlier, Desmond Spellman. Imagine Desmond, but with a less obvious name, and he's just this random guy who works for the local paper. Once again, he's specifically in charge of the obituary section, so he has access to a lot of information about the local dead. He also appears to have extensive knowledge about the town's history and ghost stories and stuff. Maybe he does ghost tours around Halloween, and most of the locals are like, yeah, that guy is just kind of quirky. Is it weird that he's a little too obsessed with ghosts and stuff? Nah, don't question it. And so Wendy helps Casper find this guy, and this guy is secretly very evil, even though it's pretty obvious. And so when Casper comes looking for help, he's like, oh wow, this little ghost kid who's like super desperate to like be alive again and mess with seriously dangerous magic and stuff, and I also need to like sacrifice a pure soul or something for my evil ritual. This works out perfectly, and so he tricks Casper into making this deal so Casper can be alive during daylight. But Casper has to like do something for the bad guy, and if he doesn't complete his end of the deal, then the bad guy gets to take his soul. But Casper doesn't know that the bad guy has set him up for failure. And so in Casper's mind, he's like, oh, this man is so kind, helping me to do this, and all I have to do is do this kind of sketchy thing for him, and all will be fine and dandy. But secretly, the guy is like, I'm about to passively kill a child. And while Casper is having to go on this journey to make sure that he gets to be fully alive permanently, we find out that this villain character is actually tied in with Casper's family history, and the bad guy is actually not what he seems. Remember how Casper's dad was like a successful inventor? Let's just say that this bad guy has some like deep-rooted beef with Casper's family and stuff. In conclusion, I just want a Casper series with adventure, mystery, lore, maybe some family drama. That could be fun. All of this just kind of sounds like Full House, but with murder. If I had a nickel for every time I referenced Full House in a Casper video essay, I'd have two. Now that we have reached the actual conclusion of this video, let me present to you my thesis. Because after spending all of this time on this essay, I want to make sure that this message is crystal clear. When I first began writing this script, I was seeking answers to questions that have been on my mind since childhood, such as, why did Casper disappear from television? Was Casper ever genuinely good? And lastly, is there really any point in trying to bring Casper back again? The conclusion that I've come to is that Casper is such a simple character and story that the only real options are to either stay as true to the original as possible or put an entirely new spin on it. Get creative, but not in a way that turns Casper into an entirely different character who just happens to be a ghost named Casper. Basically, what I'm trying to do is summarize what I said in my pitch. The story that I have in mind challenges Casper in a way that he's never been challenged before. My version of Casper is naive and desperate to get his childhood back, to the extent that he's willing to pretty much make a deal with the devil in order to do that. And he willingly goes through with it because he hasn't seen much of the world, and so he doesn't expect that much evil from it. He only ever sees the best in people. Like in the old cartoons, how he repeatedly goes up to different people asking to be their friend. No matter how many times he scares people off, he just keeps going. But during this journey in this new story, Casper's perception of himself and the world around him begins to change pretty rapidly, because now he's being forced to recognize the complexity of life and relationships and good and bad, especially within his relationships with friends and family. Not everything is black and white. Because, like, do you remember being a kid and being introduced to, like, basic forms of philosophy for the first time when you first start fully processing the concept of death and how that completely changed your perception of the world for the first time? I don't know, it's something that I never see really explored within children's media for pretty obvious reasons. Yeah, the concept is more on the heavier end for the kind of stuff that you would show in a story for kids, but it's about execution. Depending on the way that it's presented, I don't think it would be too much for a family audience to handle. Casper can either continue to be the same thing that he's always been, or you can think of him as a blank canvas that's ready to be molded into something new and interesting. The version of Casper that appeared in the 90s had so much potential, and still does. I think that there's a chance for Casper to be successful again if that version of him were to be revived, but this time with those core traits of his character being properly maintained. Really, the only thing holding it back is that fear that all studios have right now for trying new things. It's kind of ironic saying that since we're currently living during such an intense age of reboots in Hollywood. So why put the work into rebooting this franchise? Well, why not? Or in the words of Hilary Duff, why not take a crazy chance?
Oh, she did it. She made the reference to that one song. Do you remember that song?
I still have some hope for the Casper franchise. Not a lot, but it's there. But that hope is mainly embedded into the thought that one day I can somehow gain the rights to the franchise and just keep it to myself and hoard it forever. But even if there was a shred of a chance of my ideal reboot ever happening, it would probably have to be like another 20 years from now, or double that if the live action series is actually happening, because I highly doubt that any kids network would want to be associated with Riverdale Casper. Maybe one day Casper will get to return to its roots and finally give him a genuinely good, heartfelt story. Maybe one day we'll get to dust off the old Lazarus and get to see him return as the character we all know and love, Casper the Friendly Ghost. But if you're not gonna do it right, just leave the poor kid alone. It's been like 78 years.
Bow, 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 bow,
And now, as a reward for all of those who have made it to the end of this video and are somehow craving even more Casper content, I thought it would be fun if we read through this storybook together. Because even though this is just a retelling of the movie, I know that there's like a few minor changes in like dialogue and stuff, and I haven't actually read it all the way through. I thought it'd be fun to save it for this video, so we're gonna be experiencing this together. I need to like get this set up like story time in like elementary school or something. This is gonna be super awkward with like the microphone. Alright, Casper, the movie storybook. Is this ASMR? Written by Leslie McGuire, adapted from the screenplay by Sherry Stoner and Deanna Oliver. Love you guys. Sorry for roasting you so much earlier. Alright, let's dive in. Far away from a certain haunted house and high up in a Manhattan law office, an angry Kerrigan Crittenden paced back and forth. Rugg, a lawyer, was reading her father's will. Kerrigan was not happy about what she was hearing. Rugg read aloud, to the Save the Dolphins Foundation, $11 million. To the Save the Puma Foundation, $1.2 million. It's a little unfair that the Dolphins get $11 million and the Pumas only get not even a fraction of that. Forget all the charities, exclaimed Kerrigan. What did the old stiff leave me? Rugg looked up at Kerrigan and smiled as he read, and to my daughter Kerrigan, I leave Whipstaff Manor in Maine. And? Kerrigan demanded, pulling off her dark glasses. Rugg stood up and handed her an envelope. That's it, I'm afraid, and I'm late for lunch. Kerrigan's friend Dibbs opened the envelope, while Kerrigan screamed after Rugg, this isn't over. I'll fight the will. I'll drag you and everyone else into court. You know, Kerrigan. Oh wait, he's British. You know, Kerrigan, said Dibbs, holding up a photo of Whipstaff Manor. This isn't a bad piece of property. Just pretend that was a decent accent. Kerrigan grabbed the envelope and threw it into the fireplace. She did not realize until too late that a treasure map was inside the envelope. Hours later, Kerrigan and Dibbs arrived at Whipstaff Manor in Maine. Whipstaff was a tall, creepy-looking old mansion. People said it was haunted. Holding a lighter to guide the way, Kerrigan and Dibbs explored the mansion, with rooms filled with cobwebs and a rickety stairway. Whipstaff was very spooky. Huh, you don't say. Upstairs, Casper the friendly ghost heard a noise. Visitors. Casper loved visitors. Floating above the stairs, Casper rushed down to greet them. Kerrigan and Dibbs turned around. Hello, said Casper. Kerrigan and Dibbs turned around. The very second they laid eyes on Casper, they started to scream. Whipstaff was haunted. Oh wait, I forgot. ASMR. After the awful experience of seeing Casper, Kerrigan tried everything to rid her mansion of ghosts. She called a priest and an exterminator, but nothing worked. Finally, at her wit's end, she called Dr. James Harvey, a famous ghost therapist. Kerrigan had heard about Dr. Harvey from a TV interview. Ghosts are people too, Dr. Harvey said. They need help sometimes, just like the rest of us. The newscaster had explained. Dr. Harvey gave up regular psychiatry after the sudden death of his wife. Some people say he gave up his sanity too. Along with his daughter Kat, he travels from town to town searching for upset ghosts. So Kerrigan called Dr. Harvey. She asked him to come to Friendship, Maine right away. When Dr. Harvey showed up to pick up Kat at her school with all of her belongings on top of an old station wagon, Kat knew that they were moving again. Dad, in the last 2 years, I've been to 9 different schools, Kat said sadly as they drove across the desert. You're not going to find Mom. She's not a ghost. There's no such thing as ghosts. But Dr. Harvey kept driving all the way to Whipstaff Manor. And they're in the car. The car. Whipstaff Manor was creepy, Kat thought, as she and her father explored the mansion. Kat wandered around looking for a room to call her own. She first found a room with 3 beds labeled Fatso, Stretch, and Stinky. Who were they? That's the only question she has. Finally, she came to Casper's room. It was the nicest one. She decided it would be her room. After her father came in to wish her goodnight, Kat settled down in Casper's bed. Delighted, Casper poked his head up through the mattress, then morphed into a pillow. Kat tried fluffing him to get comfortable and punched him out completely. I love how that was phrased. She had no idea there was a ghost watching her. No matter how hard she tried, Kat could not fall asleep, so she decided to continue unpacking. Wait, in this scene, I thought that she was just kind of like seeing if the bed was comfortable or not after laying out her sleeping bag. She wasn't trying to go to sleep at this part in the movie. She was also still wearing like jeans and boots. It's honestly the scariest part of the story so far. Kat emptied old boxes and tried to straighten up the room when she tossed a dirty sock behind her. It sailed right into Casper's mouth. I love how they included that one gag with the sock in his mouth because it's so funny. Blech, Casper yelled. Oh no, Casper realized. He had spoken aloud. It was then that Kat saw Casper. Her eyes slowly opened wider and wider. There was a ghost in her room. Dad? She yelled frantically. Dad, I saw a real live ghost. A ghost? A ghost, Dad? Dr. Harvey raced into the room. What are you saying? You're telling me he didn't get any of that? He didn't think he had heard Kat correctly? correctly. How many times does she have to say it? I saw a ghost, Kat yelled. He had a head, a round head, and a little, he was white and see-through, and he was floating. Kat, said Dr. Harvey, ghosts can't hurt you. They're simply spirits with unfinished business. He checked under the bed. See? Nothing here, he said. Then he opened the closet door. There was Casper. Dr. Harvey screamed even louder than Kat had. Hoisting Kat over his shoulder, he ran. Poor Casper was furious at himself. I blew it. I blew it. I blew it, he muttered. I think just saying that one time got the point across. The Harveys hid in the dark hall closet. I'm sorry for not believing you about ghosts, Kat said. Apologize later, honey, said Dr. Harvey, opening the closet door a crack. Just wait here. But at that very moment, the manor lights blew out, and 3 nasty ghosts blew towards the front door. I don't like the usage of blew as a verb. They were Casper's 3 uncles, the ghostly trio, Stretch, Fatso, and Stinky. Casper floated outside to meet them. Why aren't you doing your chores, bulbhead, said Stretch. Where's dinner, demanded Fatso. I thought we'd eat outside tonight, said Casper, trying desperately to keep them out of the house. The 3 ghosts whirled around and their tails booted Casper so high he landed on the moon. We all know how that went last time. With Casper temporarily out of the way, the ghosts merrily floated inside the house. They suddenly realized that someone was in their house. I hate the way that these sentences are structured. The ghosts merrily floated inside the house. They suddenly realized that someone was in their house. It's so, clunky. I don't like that. They could have easily just written, the ghosts floated merrily inside the house. But they stopped, and they could tell someone was there. Or, they stopped. They could hear intruders, or something like that. This is just embarrassing writing. Page turn, ASMR. Just then, Dr. Harvey called out, I want to make contact with you. He exited the closet holding his flashlight. Fleshies, gasped the 3 ghosts as Dr. Harvey came around the corner. No wonder Casper was acting so weird. The 3 ghosts jumped in front of Dr. Harvey. When he saw them, he immediately fainted. That's when they decided to play a game with him. They all dove into his mouth and disappeared. The ghostly trio then found Kat in the hall, trying to get out of the closet. Fatso slammed the door, locking her back inside. When Dr. Harvey awoke, he rushed to the bathroom to splash water on his face. His face started to change. It morphed into the faces of famous people, one after another. So weird and anticlimactic when you describe it in book form. Then his nose began to itch, and the ghosts popped out. Dr. Harvey rushed down the hallway to get Kat. A huge bulge under the carpet came sliding towards him. Suddenly, Stinky popped out wearing a delivery uniform. With a giant burp, Stinky yelled, Smellogram! Dr. Harvey gasped in disgust and turned around. The ghostly trio chased him down the hall. Grabbing a toilet plunger, Dr. Harvey yelled at the oncoming suit of armor. When did the suit of armor come to life? They didn't bring that up earlier, or at least not in the book. Okay, so there's a suit of armor now. Off, back, get back. But Stretch, Fatso, and Stinky slashed the toilet plunger to pieces. I'm Dr. James Harvey, your therapist, he shouted, but the ghosts kept coming towards him, grabbing a vacuum cleaner hose. Dr. Harvey aimed it at them. That's when Kat suddenly appeared in the hall. Dad, she screamed. Kat noticed that the vacuum cleaner wouldn't turn on because it was unplugged. She grabbed the plug and pushed it into the wall just in time. The vacuum cleaner roared to life. I'll give this book a little bit of credit because I think in the movie that for some reason the vacuum cleaner is already plugged in. So, wow, this book actually did one thing that was competent. The vacuum cleaner roared to life, and Fatso, Stretch, and Stinky were sucked into the nozzle. Wow, gasped Dr. Harvey as he and Kat ran out of the mansion. We need to figure out a plan to get rid of these ghosts. The next morning, Kat woke up very early, clutching a handheld vacuum in case she ran into any more ghosts. She crept in towards the kitchen. When she got there, she gasped. Casper was floating right in front of her face. He quickly wrapped himself around her like a giant muffler. Please don't scream. I promise I won't hurt you, Casper assured her. That's when Kat saw the breakfast table. There were flowers and silverware all laid out. You have to trust me, Casper said. Just don't wake up my uncles, because they're awfully cranky. Their eyes met for the first time. I'm gonna let go now, okay? Casper said. Kat nodded. Casper slowly unwrapped himself. You're so cold, whispered Kat. What are you made of? You know that tingly feeling when your foot falls asleep? Said Casper. I think I'm made of that. Can you go invisible? Can you hurt me? Can I hurt you? Kat asked. No, we can't hurt each other, said Casper, putting out his palm. Go ahead. Kat reached over to Casper. Her hand passed straight through his. Cool! Just then, Dr. Harvey appeared in the doorway. Good morning, Dr. Harvey, said Casper. Would you like some breakfast? How about a paper? Dr. Harvey paused, unsure, then said, Sure, great service. He sat down while Casper went to fetch the newspaper. Just then, with the roaring sound of helicopters, Stretch, Fatso, and Stinky appeared through the ceiling. So I love how blurry Casper is in this one image when he's bringing her the orange juice. The points of their heads were spinning like propellers as they landed on the table, but as soon as the sunlight hit them, they fizzled and smoked into nothingness. "They're gone," Dr. Harvey said with relief, but just then, the window shades began snapping open. 1, 2, 3. "Guess again, bone bag," yelled Stretch. Then he bellowed at Casper, "How dare you serve these air-sucking intruders before us?" Casper was blown back into the refrigerator. "I was just," said Casper, trying to explain. "Gimme my meal," interrupted Stretch. Casper floated up out of the room. Seconds later, the door flew open. What? Casper came out carrying 3 trays piled high with junk food. The second Casper set down the trays, the 3 ghosts opened their mouths 3 times the normal size. They began shoveling food in with both hands. The food fell straight through their bodies and splattered on the floor. The Harveys were disgusted, and so am I. As Casper swept up the mess, the ghostly trio started talking about him, as if he weren't there. "You know what his problem is?" said Stretch. "He has no respect for us. And after all we've done for the little glowworm," agreed Fatso between bites. "He's got plenty of respect for the living, I'll tell you that," Stinky said. "Yeah, and what's so great about being alive?" asked Stretch. "Nothing," agreed all 3. "Stinky, have you had a toothache since you've been dead?" asked Stretch. "Not a one," answered the ghost. "Fatso, you ever wake up with morning breath?" asked Stretch. "I don't wake up with any breath at all. This, change of dialogue is so strange." What? I mean, the ghostly trio is bringing up some fair points, honestly. "Hey," Fatso suddenly yelled, "what the heck is he doing? The floor used to be dirty enough to eat off of." When Casper asked them to speak nicely because they had company, Stretch replied, "Well, company loves misery." Then he knocked Casper across the room. Cat was furious. She stood up and started yelling at the ghostly trio. "You guys are gross, obnoxious creeps." "Shut up, skin bag," howled Stretch. "Kiss off," yelled Cat. Oh, the censorship. "Drop dead," screamed Stretch. "Get a grave," snapped Cat. "Cat, honey," interrupted Dr. Harvey as he steered Cat to the door. "It's time for you to go to school. You don't want to be late on your first day, do you? Have fun." He kissed Cat goodbye and gently urged her out the door. Before he went back to face the ghostly trio, he gave himself a little pep talk. "Go ahead," he whispered. "You've been doing ghost therapy for years. Only this time it's for real." Just as he was about to tell them that their therapy session would start in his office after breakfast, they began pelting him with food. He was covered with muck from head to toe. "Well," said Dr. Harvey, shrugging, "it's your therapy hour. I guess you can spend it as you please." As Dr. Harvey walked into his office, his therapy couch came flying out the door, just missing him. "Johns Hopkins University. Very impressive," said Fatso, throwing Dr. Harvey's diploma in the air. Stretch aimed his finger and blew it to bits. They were about to blow up a picture of Amelia, Dr. Harvey's dead wife, when he grabbed it from them. "Not this one, please," said Dr. Harvey. "You looking for Amelia?" asked Stretch. "Go find her, Fatso." Well, that exchange happened a lot faster than in the movie. Moments later, there was knocking on the closet door. The door opened to reveal Fatso dressed like a woman. His lips were puckered up for a kiss as he crooned, "My man." Dr. Harvey could not believe his misfortune. These ghosts were crazy. In her new classroom, the first day at her new school, Mr. Curtis made Kat get up in front of the whole class to introduce herself. Everything was going fine until Mr. Curtis asked where Kat was living. That raises another question that I didn't think about before. What kind of a teacher asks a student to share where they live? I know it's not like he was encouraging her to share her personal address, but it's still kind of weird. "In a house," she stammered. "Kinda up a hill." "Not Whipstaff?" asked Mr. Curtis. "Well, yeah, I mean, it looks kind of funky outside," Kat murmured, "but inside it's kind of cool." "Yeah, if you happen to drink blood," said a student. Everyone burst out laughing. Another student said, "This girl has a seriously creepy house. Why not have our Halloween party there?" "Wait a minute," a girl named Amber whined. "I thought we agreed to have the party at my house, but after the class took a vote, it was unanimous. Party would be at Kat's house." Meanwhile, Kerrigan and Dibbs had just discovered that Whipstaff Manor had a secret underground chamber. What a segue. And by that I mean no segue. They rushed over to the manor. Maybe the secret treasure was hidden in that room. How did they discover that outside of the house? Did they find old blueprints or something? Oh, whatever. Oh, this book is so long. Back at Whipstaff Manor, Dr. Harvey put up a chart in front of the ghost. He pointed at the large word written there. Death. D. You are in denial. E. You feel empty. A. You were abandoned. T. Too bad about me. H. Help. What can I do about it? He began. Dr. Harvey went on and on, lecturing the ghosts when he was interrupted by the slam of a door. Dad, came Kat's breathless voice from the hallway. Can I have a party? Dr. Harvey was not pleased. A party in a house full of ghosts? Was Kat crazy too? Then the doorbell rang. Kat raced to answer it. Vic, a cute boy from her class, was standing out on the porch. Did you ask your dad about the party? He said. Kat nodded. As they talked, Casper appeared behind Vic, making fun of him. You want to hang out with me at the party? Asked Vic. I'd love to, answered Kat. Kat had no way of knowing that Vic and Amber were tricking her. Back upstairs in her room, Kat was humming happily when Casper reappeared. He tried to get her to change her mind about hanging out with Vic at her party. I'm a good dancer. I don't need a costume. What's this guy have that I don't have? A pulse, said Kat, and a tan. Suddenly, Casper grabbed Kat's hand and dragged her out the window. He flew her through the night to the ledge of the night house. I come here every night. Casper, this is beautiful, Kat said, amazed. What were you like when you were alive? Do you remember your dad or your mom? But Casper couldn't remember anything. Kat thought that was sad. All the way back home, she felt bad for Casper. Later that night, Kat and Casper were back in her room. Kat said she was also afraid that she would start to forget her mom, just the way Casper had. If my mom's a ghost, Kat asked, starting to fall asleep, did she forget about me? She would never forget about you, said Casper softly. If I were alive, would you go to the Halloween dance with me? Maybe these two are perfect for each other, because neither of them can read the room. Yes, murmured Kat. Then she fell fast asleep. Casper watched her sleep for a long time. Kat spent the next morning getting ready for the party. She needed a costume, and unfortunately, there was no money to buy one. She found her way up into the dusty attic. She walked into a magical circular room with tall windows. A toy Calio playing tinkling music as Kat began looking through boxes. From another part of the house, Casper heard the Calliope music. Curious, he went upstairs to the attic room. There was Kat, and there were all the toys and games from when he was alive. Casper suddenly remembered who he was. I remember, I used to sneak up here way past bedtime and read Treasure Island, he exclaimed. He showed Kat pictures of his parents and his 3 uncles before they were ghosts. Kat found one of Casper's mother's lace dresses. Casper helped her slip it on. It looked beautiful. Can I wear this to the party? She asked. Casper was so busy playing with his old sled that he didn't answer. Then Kat found a dusty newspaper article on the floor. She read it aloud. Prominent inventor J.T. McFadden declared legally insane. The article explained that Casper's dad claimed he was haunted by his son's ghost. He had invented a machine to bring Casper back to life. The Lazarus machine, exclaimed Casper, remembering. Follow me. My dad hid it, but I remember where it was. What they didn't know was that Kerrigan and Dibbs had overheard the entire conversation from their hiding place. Cackling with delight, Kerrigan kissed Dibbs. The treasure was near. Maybe the treasure was the friends we made along the way. Casper flew Kat to an overstuffed chair on the second floor balcony of the library. He pulled one of the crystals on the lamp. As Kerrigan and Dibbs watched in surprise, the chair, with Kat sitting in it, immediately shot through a revolving door and went down several ramps into a tunnel. One of the tunnels had many robot arms that tried to shave Kat's face, brush her teeth, wash her face, and fix her hair. Finally, the machine put a bow tie around her neck. The chair emerged into an underground lab inside the cliff that was surrounded by seawater. Oh, so I was close when I said earlier that I wondered if the lab was like built around a lake. It was built around the ocean, apparently. By that time, Kat was wearing the lace dress, polished sneakers, and a man's bow tie. She looked mighty silly. Minutes later, Kerrigan and Dibbs came out of the tunnel too. They had both experienced the Up and Atom machine, and they had been dressed up too, but they were both wearing the same tie wrapped around both their necks. Kerrigan and Dibbs hid as they watched Kat and Casper try to find out how to raise the Lazarus machine from the pool of water. Kerrigan wanted to find out where her treasure was hidden. She figured Casper would lead her to it. Casper had been trying everything to bring the Lazarus up to the surface of the water. Will this Lazarus machine really bring you back to life, Casper? Kat asked. Casper nodded, continued searching for the on switch near the vault. He doesn't say anything, he just nods. Okay. Kat was searching for it too. She found a dusty old copy of the famous book called Frankenstein. She opened it to discover 3 buttons inside. Just at the moment she punched one of them, Casper yelled, I found it! Kat did not say anything as they heard a loud grumbling noise. A geyser of seawater bubbled and foamed as a sphere-shaped chamber rose to the surface. Kerrigan smiled to herself. At last! Her treasure must be inside that big old machine. Or maybe it was over inside that locked vault. Kerrigan motioned to Dibbs. The two of them sneaked over toward the vault door. Kat watched the Lazarus emerge. Wow, she said. Casper looked at the Lazarus and said, my dad got sent away before he could use it on me. Kat walked towards what looked like the main controls. In a small box-like holder was a single red vial. Most of the gel inside the vial looked like it had leaked out. Kat Kat picked it up and shook it. "What's this?" she asked Casper. Casper swooped over and plucked the vial from her hand. "Careful! That's what makes it work." Kat shook her head. She didn't quite get it. "Girl, he literally just explained it to you. It's what brings ghosts back to life," Casper explained. He looked at the vial thoughtfully. Then he stuck the vial in a slot on the Lazarus. Kat watched, realizing the importance of what he was about to do. Yeah, he's about to break like several laws of nature. Casper opened the door to the Lazarus chamber, then looked at Kat. "Pull the lever," Casper said. "I'm gonna be alive." Casper closed the chamber door, shutting himself inside. Kat stepped up to the control panel. "How am I gonna do this?" she said softly. "I couldn't even get my toy baking oven to work." I love how they couldn't use Easy Bake Oven. She found a lever and pulled it, hoping it was the right one. The Lazarus began to shake and roar. Steam rose from its top. Either it was working, or it was self-destructing. Kat didn't know which. All of a sudden, Kerrigan had been hiding in the shadows. Reached for the slot. She yanked the red vial out. The Lazarus coughed, sputtered, then stalled. It was quiet. Kat rushed out to Casper and gasped, horrified. Were her eyes telling her the truth? That's so overdramatic. She was staring at a jelly-like blob with eyes. "Am I alive?" asked Casper. When Dibbs saw Kerrigan snatch the vial from the Lazarus, he ran to follow her. Neither of them paid attention to the blob that Casper now was. When they were out of sight, Kerrigan finally spoke. "Dibbs, do you have any idea what this means?" "Yes? No," stuttered Dibbs. "It means no more fear of death," said Kerrigan. "One minute you're a ghost, able to walk through walls. The next minute you're back to being human, free to come and go as you please." "You mean when you're a ghost?" said Dibbs. "No, when you are," answered Kerrigan. Dibbs realized that Kerrigan wanted him to become a ghost. He ran as fast as he could out of the room. Kerrigan chased after him, the vial held tightly in her hand. Kerrigan couldn't find Dibbs. Then she tripped. Dibbs saw the vial fall into the driveway and snatched it. Casper tried to wrench it from Dibbs. When did Casper get there? Kerrigan was driving right towards them. Dibbs rolled out of the way just in time to see Kerrigan's car go flying off the cliff. Dibbs ran to the cliff's edge. "Kerrigan?" he cried, peering over the edge. Oh, I forgot he's British. "Are you a ghost yet?" Not seeing anything, he stepped back. "Not so fast, little man," boomed Kerrigan. She was now a huge, scary ghost. Followed by Dibbs, Kerrigan floated back towards the lab, where just moments before Casper had been a blob. Kat looked up as the ghostly form rushed over her head. What was that? She wondered. Just then, Kerrigan emerged from the vault holding a treasure chest. "My treasure!" yelled Casper. "You mean my treasure," said Kerrigan evilly. Kat snatched the vial from Kerrigan and ran upstairs, just in time to hear the doorbell ring. Her entire class had just arrived for the Halloween party. Meanwhile, Dr. Harvey had failed to rid the house of the 3 crazy ghosts. He decided to pretend that he was leaving, so maybe the ghosts would get the idea to leave too. It was called reverse psychology. Wow, Dr. Harvey, that is so big-brained of you. The ghostly trio watched the doctor as he began to pack up his belongings. "Hey," said Stretch. "Wait a sec, Doc. You aren't thinking of packing it in now, are ya?" Dr. Harvey ignored Stretch. "He was just starting to have fun," whined Fatso. Dr. Harvey ignored Fatso. "It ain't often we meet a bone bag as amusing as you," said Stinky. Dr. Harvey ignored Stinky too. All of a sudden, the ghostly trio was feeling sad. Who would they torture and tease if Dr. Harvey left? Life would be so boring. They agreed among themselves about what to do. Finally, they decided it was time to turn him into a ghost like themselves. Wait, in this version, do they actually kill Dr. Harvey themselves? Might just be getting interesting. The 3 ghosts swooped over to Dr. Harvey, put their arms under his, and whisked him right out the window. Dibbs hunched outside under the window, watched the doctor go flying away. Dibbs went down to the lab to try to open the treasure chest. Kat ignored him and loaded the vial into the Lazarus for Casper. Kerrigan wanted to be human again, too. Dibbs pulled the vial out and refused to give it to Kerrigan. In a rage, Kerrigan blew Dibbs out through a skylight. 1 down. Down fell the vial from the sky into her hands. But suddenly, Kerrigan started to fizzle and smoke. With a poof, she was gone. 2 down. Kerrigan and Dibbs were gone forever. What? Okay, with the bit where the ghostly trio pretend to die because they were exposed to sunlight, I'm making a theory that there was like an original plot line where like ghosts like can't be exposed to moonlight instead of sunlight, because that's the only way that makes sense to me, because Kerrigan throws Dibbs out the window and then the moonlight starts pouring in, and so when she throws Dibbs out, that exposes the light and that would kill her. That's okay. Kat grabbed the vial. It was time for Casper to become human again. She led him to the Lazarus and was about about to pull the lever when they heard a voice. "Honey, I'm home." They turned to see Dr. Harvey. He was a ghost. Kat began to cry. No matter what she did, her dad wouldn't remember who she was until she made their special OK sign. Oh dear, this book is such a mess. "What have I done?" he said. "Oh, please don't cry, please." Casper floated Dr. Harvey to the Lazarus, saying, "Come on, Dr. Harvey, the living need you more than the dead." With Dr. Harvey and the Lazarus, Casper shut the chamber door. The lights in the entire mansion dimmed as the Lazarus whirred to action. Seconds later, Dr. Harvey stepped out of the Lazarus, alive and well. "I feel great," Dr. Harvey exclaimed. "But Kat, your party is starting without you. Your date is probably waiting." Casper looked very sad as they walked away. Downstairs in the library, Amber was sitting on Vic's shoulders. They were looking in the mirror at their monster costume. Suddenly, Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso appeared in the mirror too. The Amber Vic monster screamed and ran out the door. Everyone at the party thought it was some party joke. You know, going to a party and having people do party jokes. What a classic. Upstairs, Casper sat sadly in the toy room, listening to the party below. He was sad. A voice said softly, "That was a very noble thing you did tonight, Casper." He looked up to see the ghost of Amelia, Kat's mom. "For what you've done, I'm giving you your dream in return. Just for tonight, sort of a Cinderella deal." "So I have until midnight?" asked Casper. "No, only until 10, smiled Amelia. Cinderella wasn't 12 years old. Seconds later, a handsome boy in a pirate costume came bounding down the stairs. So it comes across as more of like a Victorian-era pirate. So he is supposed to be dressed like a pirate. To be fair, it's not a good pirate costume. I would love a different version of this scene. It all plays out the exact same and everything, but Casper's wearing a gigantic pirate hat. He walked right up to Kat and extended his hand. Kat took it, wondering who he was. As they eased onto the dance floor, Kat noticed something familiar about him. "I told you I was a good dancer," the pirate said. "Casper?" asked Kat in disbelief. As the two happy young people danced, Dr. Harvey watched from the stairs. "She's growing up pretty, isn't she?" said Amelia. Dr. Harvey's eyes opened wide. His wife had finally contacted him. He turned around. There she was. "James, I know you're searching for me," said Amelia, "so I just came to tell you to knock it off." I adore this version of Amelia. "You're a wonderful father. You two will be just fine." "No wonder I miss you so much," Dr. Harvey told her as the two of them finally said goodbye and Amelia faded away. Then he turned back to watch the packed dance floor. "But how did this happen?" Kat asked Casper, amazed. "Let's just say I have friends in high places," Casper answered. But then the clock chimed 10. Casper transformed back into a ghost before everyone's eyes. "Boo," said Casper. All the kids took one look at Casper and ran screaming from the house. Kat and Casper danced alone. "Not bad for my first party, huh?" Kat said. "They'll never forget it in this town," replied Casper. "And it ain't over yet," Dr. Harvey chimed in. "Hit it, boys." Stretch, Stinky, and Fatso started playing a funky dance song as Casper happily floated near the ceiling. He was grinning and watching Kat dance with Dr. Harvey. Everything had worked out for the best after all. And that was Casper, the movie storybook. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Should I come up with a name for subscribers? Subscribe to become a fleshie, because why not?